Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is bright and early on a Tuesday morning. I am here in Richmond, Virginia on this bright, I don't know if it's bright, the window's closed. Whatever. It will be bright. The sun will come out. I give you a flat fact promise that will take place if you are in an area where the sun has not risen yet. And it doesn't really rise. It's just always there. We just kind of turn. Either way, welcome to the show. I'm glad that you can join me on this episode. We have a damn good show. Andre Telejenko is going to be here. Garland Nixon is going to be here. Sarah Bills is going to be here. We have another damn good episode for you. This show has been growing. I appreciate the growth. I appreciate all of the newcomers coming to this broadcasting program. We are up to nearly 44,000, I believe. And that number is still going up. Welcome. I appreciate all of you, and I thank all of you for finding some level of interest, concern, or care about the little engine that is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'm looking forward to that 50K. I still don't know what we're going to do on 50K. I'm looking forward to 100K. My mind will be blown at that, but whatever. I'm looking forward to all of that stuff, and I hope you guys are going to be here with me as we continue to pursue our course. My job, sitting on the moon, looking at events. That is the way I look at my task as your humble host of this humble show. Even though I don't necessarily talk like it's a humble show sometimes. 3 years, a couple of months of a lot of people killing each other. And I've often asked this question, what is it for? Especially when it all will come to an end. And when it all will come to an end with those territories in Russian possession, with millions or a million people no longer on the face of the earth coming out of Ukraine, with millions that have fled Ukraine, with a country that has been fundamentally and utterly destroyed and dismembered, that will be the end of all of this. In the beginning of all of this, there were deals that could have been made that the West didn't want because they didn't see Russia with a certain level of respect. And they believed they could do whatever they wanted without consequence. There have been consequences. Those consequences have been dramatic and catastrophic in any sense of the word, of dramatic and catastrophic. This is where we are. Now, Trump and Russia have started to engage in negotiations, which makes it clear that the principles are Trump and Russia, not these European gang of idiots and goofballs who've decided that they want another third world war. No, Trump and the US. Putin and Trump had a conversation a couple of days ago. And in that conversation, the readout for it is rather fascinating because I know a lot of people believe that the peace process is not really going anywhere, that Donald Trump is posturing. And I would agree with them. Donald Trump is posturing. But you must understand, up to this point, there were very little, if any, negotiations or conversations at all. And the fact that the principals are now in a conversation with each other is rather phenomenal. Even though Trump got nothing out of it in real terms, this is what I think is taking place. I do think that Russia and the US agree on the predominant majority of whatever they're discussing. I mean, when you get Witkoff saying, we agree on the majority of this stuff. Okay, if that's true, then that is 90% of the way there as compared to the Biden administration. Now, will the US be able to agree to everything? Probably not. Probably a lot of the stuff is a hard pill to swallow. In fact, losing the war is a hard pill to swallow. For the US and NATO to invest all of their largesse into the Ukrainian military in order to get them to be able to stand up and fight the Russians, that is a lot of power, money, economic and financial might, soft power that is being applied to one very specific thing, and that is to beat the Russians using Ukraine as a battering ram to do it. Because if the US, or for that matter, NATO gets involved, you have a world war, which is something most people want to avoid. And they lost. And they are losing now as the Russians slowly, inexorably move westward without the Ukrainian military, the Europeans, or for that matter, even America, being able to do anything about it. That is a difficult pill to swallow, especially with this idea that we're with you for as long as it takes, up until the point that we're not. So, yes, I expect gyration. Yes, I expect Trump trying to be strong and look strong as he goes about a process to which they lost, and he has very little, if any, leverage in. The ceasefire thing was always going to be dead on arrival. Always. I strongly suspect that Trump knew, and the people around him, I would hope, knew it was going to be dead on arrival. So when they threw that out, Russia, in its response, okay, what is Russia going to do? Obviously, they're going to say no. How are they going to say no is the question. And fact of the matter is, Putin, being a diplomat, took a diplomatic approach in a way that the people under Putin didn't. But you must understand, both of these things are true. Both are true. When Medvedev comes out and effectively says, Ukraine is on the menu, and the Brits and the Germans, we're going to have German Brussels sprouts, and we're going to have British fish, and Ukraine is effectively on the menu. It's going to be carved up. That's the conversation. And even when you get Medvedev taking this hard-ass approach, effectively saying, putting a knife in Starmer or putting a knife in Macron, talking about he wants to be the new Napoleon, I would wager to you that that is what Putin thinks, even though what Putin says is different. Both are true. Both are realities, in a sense, in the way that these things are effectively moving through a process that eventually will end up with something. It is very possible that Trump could walk. Don't misunderstand me. It is very possible that the US president can't do what he wants and in the direction that he seemingly wants to move. That is very possible. So don't misunderstand me. But clearly, he wants to move in a direction. Russia is working with him to move in that direction, which is the exact reason that Putin did not put a knife in Trump's proposal. Even in the readout on the Russian side, where Trump and Putin are talking, Putin is being very diplomatic, very respectful. He is not flattering in the way that the European leaders were doing, because he doesn't need to. He's winning a military campaign. He knows he's winning a military campaign. Why do you need to flatter when you have won and shown that you have hard power on the ground in order to enact what you want to do if you need to? Meaning, if Trump walks, fair enough. We're continuing a military campaign that we are clearly winning. So no, he is not going to be one of these European idiots or Canadian idiots that have no capacity to do anything in regards to their sphere of influence. No, he is being a respectful leader that is dealing with another world leader in order to try to deal with a conflict that should have never taken place. What started off as a 30-day ceasefire proposal ended up with Putin saying, okay, I'll give you a bone. I give you a bone, a fart in a jar, as I used to call it. You can have that. And you can take that fart in a jar and you can sell it to the American public as if you're getting something accomplished. But it is only a fart in a jar. And what I mean by that is this idea of, okay, well, we're going to make agreements on the Black Sea. Okay, well, that wasn't something that Russia was doing really anyway. So, okay, fair enough. We can do that. We want to stop attacks on the energy grid for 30 days. Okay, fair enough. Who said we were going to attack the energy grid anyway in 30 days? Maybe we're going to do it in 29 days. We'll give you the bone of 2 days. Fair enough. We can do that. Meaning we will give you what we never wanted. The same thing is true, by the way, for a larger deal that Donald Trump may come up with. Europe has ran with this idea that Russia is trying to take over all of Ukraine. Hell, they've gone further. Russia's want to take over all of Europe. Okay. If you're Trump, Russia stops. You get your deal, and you run around saying, we protected Ukraine because Russia was going to take all of it. I'm trying to say that Russia, Putin, has decided to work with Trump in maneuvering into some kind of deal, whatever that deal is. Now, Russia will keep their territory. Now, whether Putin gives something up later, who knows? They're continuously moving. So what you've got, even in a readout, both leaders express mutual interest in normalizing bilateral relations, recognizing the shared responsibility of Russia and the United States in ensuring global security and stability. In this context, they explore various areas of potential cooperation, including discussion on mutually beneficial economic and energy partnerships. Again, as I pointed out, this conversation is about more than Ukraine. If it's about isolated to Ukraine, then there is no conversation. Ukraine has lost this war. And so if you're the US, well, you have interests that go beyond the war. You have things that you can do that go beyond the war, that you can add to the table in order to, let's say, add leverage to a conversation where no leverage existed if you isolated the conversation to Ukraine. If you and I are a married couple and you cheated on me, and we keep the conversation isolated to the fact that you cheated on me, okay, well, that's not really a space that you could exist in all that well. You're going to be at the worst end of that conversation. If you expand it to the fact that I might have cheated on you, okay, now we have a conversation that goes beyond this very specific thing that you don't really have any leg to stand on. It's that you've lost. You have to own that. But if I have larger interests and larger things that I can add to the pot, here's a bit of gold on the table. Here's a bit of platinum on the table. Here's something else. Okay, now we're having a conversation. And within the context of that conversation, Ukraine fits in it. They also pointed out, though, that they were going to continue diplomatic relations. Now, and start their negotiating teams. So what they started off as a weak, pointless 30-day ceasefire has now ended up with negotiations that are continuing while Russia continues the war. I hope you get my point. Russia is continuing with its military aims and objectives while a peace negotiation continues to take place, which, all things being equal, is the most ideal situation that you were going to get. Russia was never going to stop. Soldiers in Kursk were always screwed. They were always going to have to surrender or die. One of two options. That was brought up in the meeting too. Putin said, we are empathetic about it. We understand your concerns. It is an unfortunate situation. They can surrender. And when they surrender, they will be treated accordingly. Meaning you didn't get anything out of that. You didn't get anything out of any of this in real terms. However, the Russians are working with Trump in regards to this process. So Trump and Witkoff will come back. The president is working tirelessly towards peace. The president is guiding this 30-day ceasefire. Both leaders have agreed. Trump, and this is only possible because Trump got elected. They're going to sell it. Whatever they get, they're going to sell it. They're going to run around the country saying, this is what I got. This is the deal. Now, the catch becomes, how does the U.S. president that's lost the war, or he's going to blame it on Joe Biden, but whatever. How does he get Europe? How does he get Ukraine? How does he get that horse to water? And how does he get that horse to drink? That is the question. That is a fascinating question. And that is what a lot of the gyrations and the movements and shakes that the Trump administration will have to do in order to get that accomplished. Witkoff, I like the guy. I don't even know him, and I like the guy. And I think I like him just because of the Israel thing. Even though the Israel thing fell apart, I like the fact that he said, I don't give a F what day it is, we're going to get this shit accomplished. And I get the sense of him being a straight shooter and going to Moscow saying, what do you want? How do we get this deal done? And Moscow saying, this is what we want to get the deal done. He says, okay, let me talk to the principal. Meaning, I get the sense that this conversation is far more straightforward and direct, and far more in the sense of, we acknowledge the hard power realities on the ground that we can't change this context. We, however, want to end this because Trump said he was going to end it. What do you need to do it? It's about making a deal. We'll see. Maybe this is me being too optimistic. Maybe I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess. Maybe it's my bias of chess logic that you just have to work between the lines. You have a very specific objective. Some of the moves that you make seem, incomprehensible because it's like, okay, that's nothing to do with getting the king. You're on the queen side. But even those moves are in cooperation with an objective that is larger in scope than the individual move would seem when it's made. And so the fact that they're talking, the fact that they're going to be further conversations over the weekend in, I believe, Saudi Arabia and Jeddah, it's a good thing. And it does show the movement. And yeah, I'm saying this as a fart in a jar to make the point that the ceasefire is being sold as something when it's not really anything, even though it is kind of something on a lower level, if that makes sense. Meaning it matters, even if it doesn't ultimately matter. The fact that the US president is speaking with the Russian president directly is a big deal. The fact that both of these principles, on some level, have the power. Putin has more power in this case to end it because he's Putin. Trump claims the power to do it. The catch is, does he have the power to do it? I think he does. I mean, for all intents and purposes, he's been able to cow the Republican side that has been against him, meaning the Lindsey Grahams of the world. I have Lindsey Graham come out and effectively say, Zelensky is not even a good business partner in this moment. Okay, well, that's big, considering Lindsey Graham is one of the main hawks on this war on the Republican side. I'm saying that Trump has not gotten a huge amount of pushback in the United States coming from the right that, for all intents and purposes, believe in this war. That is astonishing. He's bent his political flank on his right into a shape where they won't dare say anything, despite the fact that they fully disagree with what Donald Trump is doing. That is astonishing. That is just astonishing. This is the Republican Party we're talking about. And Trump has been able to get them online. Do not test me, in which case they haven't. Liberals, I don't think he cares about. And so even though they're screeching about the war, they're so radically and fundamentally dysfunctional that they don't matter. Meaning the Democratic Party with the 27-29% rating by CNN and NBC, and with a political party that is very angry at them and that has been screaming at them at these kind of meetups that Congress members go to, are in no position to mount a defense or an attack on Donald Trump on this issue. And honestly, haven't even been able to do it on issues where they should be able to do so. I'm saying that this is a rather astonishing moment. No, I don't believe this is going to last for 100 years. But if it lasts for 20, if it lasts for 30, that's better than we have now. I guess I'm saying I'm taking a cautiously optimistic view of what we're seeing take place. It is new. It is something we haven't had, at least not with the prior administrations on this issue. Trump is taking a political risk. There was no way to know as a flat fact that his own party wouldn't have revolted. There's no way to know as a flat fact that they won't revolt at a later date, especially if he gets weaker in a political sense, which he may, by the way, which means you have to do this now and you have to get this done soon. After 100 days, your power ebbs slowly, ebbs away. He's at 47% now. If that number goes to Joe Biden levels, his political power and influence wanes, especially with the American public that is in a wait and see mode in regards to this administration. I will give him credit, though. I will give him credit. Credit is due. It's warranted, providing he actually does what's necessary to end it. I know a lot of people say, well, why don't Trump just walk away? He could do that. Steve Bannon said, walk the F away. Steve Bannon is not entirely wrong. The issue also is that is not what he got elected on. He got elected as a deal maker. And as a deal maker, he wants to make the deal. He wants to sign the document. He wants to go to Moscow. He wants to bring Putin here. He wants to shake hands and raise hands and say, we're in a new era. That's what he wants. That is an ideal for him. Whether he gets that, who knows? But he wants it, and he seems to be trying for it. I want to bring on my guests. We're joined with Andrei Telizhenko. Andrei Telizhenko. Oh, come on now. That weird. Andrei Telizhenko. He is an Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat. Andrei, man, thank you for joining me again. How are you doing today? You doing all right?
Hi, Jamal. Hi, everybody. Doing great. Great weather. Spring is in the air, so hopefully peace talks are underway. Hopefully things will go the way it's planned.
Well, they do seem to be on the way. Apparently, well, as I pointed out, Trump and Putin talked 2 days ago. Those talks centered around effectively, Trump saying he wants a ceasefire, Putin telling him no, and having a larger conversation over Ukraine. And Witkoff and Putin also talked. Witkoff says we're weeks away from a deal. Okay, that is very, I'm very skeptical of that. But Witkoff is like, we're weeks away from a deal. Now, weeks, they're weeks in 50 years, right? So we're a million weeks away from a deal. Okay, fair enough, whatever. But weeks away from a deal, saying that Putin and Trump agree on the grand contours of whatever that deal is. I suspect what that means is that the regions that Russia is taken, or as they say, liberated, are going to remain under Russian auspices, and for obvious reasons that the U.S. and Europe can't do anything about it. So even this notion of Crimea, like all of these issues, I would imagine were brought up, and they're saying we are close to a deal. Immediately after the 30-day ceasefire was agreed upon, Ukraine, under Zelensky, flips out and attacks the energy sector, the exact part of the agreement that Trump came up with. So it's like, yeah, we agree upon the 30-day ceasefire, and then Ukraine immediately breaks the ceasefire to get across. We're not on board for this process. I'm fascinated by this dynamic because it's effectively a proxy of the U.S. blowing off the fact that the principal in the war. What the hell?
I'm here. I can
That was weird. I'm sorry. That was weird. Let me get your take.
First of all,
Trump, real quick, Trump needs somebody in Ukraine. Is my major point that I'm trying to get at before I was interrupted by whoever that was. He needs somebody in Ukraine. And I guess my thing is there someone currently in Ukraine that can take over the reins of government and work with him? Or not so much, that for the most part, the only people who are there are the Banderites, the fascists, the the right wing, and that none of them are in a position or will be willing to make a deal with Trump in order to end this. And one last question. Could they make a deal? Meaning, even if Zelensky wanted to, would he be able to do that, considering the people who are around him?
In Ukraine, there's no opposition at all. Unfortunately, that is the situation. The people who are so-called opposition, or whatever you call them, Poroshenko, Timoshenko, the political road that there were talks with Trump Jr. and Kushner and Woodcock. Yeah, they're there, but are they opposition? No, they're not, because Poroshenko is a Biden guy, Burisma guy, Biden guy, the guy who was after the coup placed by Newland and Biden to rule Ukraine. Big oligarch, a lot of chocolate factories, a lot of corruption under him, very greedy. Will even though he's a billionaire, will choke on $100 bill just to get it. That's him, as I said. But he's owned by the West, like the deep state. Not in America. He's owned by the deep state, by Newland, and he will go around to anybody who's going to buy him out. But the problem is he is the one who did not implement fully the Minsk agreements. He signed them under when there was the Ilovaisk and the Baltsova, when the Ukrainian army was being destroyed in eastern Ukraine by the free people in Donbass. And then they said, "Oh, we'll sign a peace deal." So that's when Minsk I, Minsk II happened during those situations. In Ukraine, when there's a situation, they always already sign a peace deal. Then they basically just throw it away.
Wait, real quick to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt you on that. So that's kind of my point. Like Boris Johnson, I have the clip somewhere. Boris Johnson made a point of saying, yeah, we signed the Minsk agreements, Zelensky did. However, Zelensky couldn't implement those agreements because he had a hard right wing that would not allow him to do so.
The hard right wing is controlled by the Secret Service of Ukraine, which is controlled by the CIA and the other intel agencies. That's what I've been talking about the last year and a half. If Trump really wants peace, get out the intel groups out of Ukraine, CIA, even the FBI is there, even though it's not allowed to be on foreign soil doing these things. They are there. Get them out of Ukraine. There's 16 intel agencies on the Ukrainian soil. Get them out of there. All the biolabs, all the radical Nazi groups. They're the ones who are being controlled by the West, by the deep state. You get the CIA out of Ukraine, and CIA, I mean, even all the other agencies. All these right-wing groups are going to fall apart because they're going to be able to control. They're all like real radical guys who are in there for the money. They don't. The heads of those organizations are not in there for the idea. Maybe the people in the middle are, because I was advising to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine, overseeing Ukraine intelligence, law enforcement, and all that kind of issues. And I had files on all these radical right wing Banderites, Nazi group, like people who were there. And we know what would really is happening. They're all controlled. They take away the control, they're going to fall apart. Or the government, the real law enforcement, can actually take them apart if they're not controlled by anybody or coordinated or supported. The same as Azov is being coordinated, but by the Jamestown Foundation. There were people who were flying into DC to talk to this group, and then they were being taught on foreign relations and all these intel classes and all that kind of stuff. And then they're flown back to Ukraine to coordinate these groups. So these are like, it's all coordinated. Same with I said, Poroshenko. He's coordinated. He cannot be in a position. He didn't go with the Minsk. He didn't sign it. He signed it, but he didn't implement it, even though Ukraine voted for this in the United Nations. And he could have had no war. The same with Zelensky. He could have done the same thing. But it's all been coordinated by the West. They're playing this game, cat and mouse, that, oh, they're good and they're bad. But no, they're all the same. The radicals, Poroshenko, Tymoshenko, Yatsenyuk, Arestovich, coordinated by Novichkin, who sold off Yanukovych after the coup to Newland and Biden, and then he's protected by the CIA right now. Yeah. Also, Dubinsky. I'm very heartbroken that this guy is in prison for political crimes that he did not commit. Nobody should be in prison. He's a member of parliament. He should be in the parliament. The people voted for him. But the question is, there's 15,000 other political prisoners. Gonzalo Lira, one of them, a U.S. citizen. None of them had a possibility to go online and shout out and speak out and tweet and publish tweets on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube about their political position and criticize Zelensky and that regime. None of those 15,000 official by the United Nations political prisoners in Ukraine, together with Gonzalo Lira, a U.S. citizen, did not have a chance to do what Dubinsky's doing. My question is, what did he sell out to be able to do this? That he's not being shot after what maybe he can write a tweet. He writes a tweet, but then he's going to get killed, shot, or whatever happens. Going to have something happen to him in prison, like to Gonzalo Lira, and that's it. Maybe he sold out to something. Maybe he sold out to Kolomoisky, the person he worked for. I don't know. I was not there, but so there's no opposition. Problem is, it's all coordinated. There's all people who are working under somebody who's working within the deep state. The Kiev regime today, Zelensky is working with the deep state, Poroshenko deep state, Tymoshenko deep state. Her husband has businesses in Czech Republic and the United States, which is coordinated by the U.S. intel groups. So there's nobody who's loyal to Ukraine or loyal to the peace talks that Trump wants to happen. They all hate Trump because he is not from their so-called team. That is the biggest problem. And that is my question. There's nobody in Ukraine that Trump can trust today. Anybody who's out of Ukraine, there's some people who left that can be trusted. I'm not saying about myself, I'm saying there's other people. Look at those people who want to talk about peace for the last 10 years in Ukraine. Focus on those people. Maybe they're toxic, but at least they wanted peace. They didn't want war. All these political crowds that are in Kiev today, and some of them who are not in Kiev, in London, and other places, have been talking about war all this time. We didn't care. Like Arestovich, he was part of the warmongers. He was there promising people that this war is going to end in 3 days, saying, I'm going to send a bottle of cognac to Putin if he takes the LNR and DNR republics. That's was his quote. That's what he said when the war started. And he was happy about it. But then when the West failed to cripple Russia, and he fled Ukraine and then understood that he's going to become the controlled opposition, being financed by Novichkin, by Akhmetov, or other guys from the Zelensky crowd who are money laundering their money. And then these people are going to, the issue is, these people are going to come in, not only continue the war, but continue the money laundering process for the deep state through Ukraine. That's why there's no real opposition that is going to come in and clean house. And even if Trump is going to make a deal with Poroshenko, Tymoshenko, even if they're going to promise their loyalty to him, they're going to be still owned because there's a file on them within the deep state and the globalists, Soros, CIA, whatever. They're going to be controlled by them, and they're going to be still working against the president of the United States, against the interest of Ukraine, first of all. Don't want peace with Russia. And that is the biggest problem here. They're going to be money laundering the money that's still going to go through Ukraine. So there's nobody to trust out of those people. That's what they did. The West did. They toxified anybody else who wanted peace. left the politicians who can be trusted for the deep state in Ukraine. So if Trump will make a deal, they'll still sabotage those agreements. Yes, they won't be like Zelensky, like whatever he is. Oh crap, sorry, but
No,
but they will be warmongers and representing the warmongering machine, and they will sabotage Trump in any way possible. Maybe as not as open as Zelensky, but they will still work for the globalists against Russia. Even though these people had businesses in Russia, Poroshenko had businesses in Russia, he still bombarded Donbass and killed 15,000 people under his leadership. They cannot be Timoshenko, the same thing, like in Yatsenyuk and all these people. And I said, a lot of questions about Arestovich, questions about Dubinsky, a lot, because that's like illogical for me what is happening. Yeah, maybe they're saying the right things, but they're not logical.
Your point is, even if they get rid of Zelensky, even if they get rid of Zelensky, that the government that's currently there, meaning anybody who they would put in a political space, is effectively a tool. The right wing has effectively infiltrated all of the mechanics of Ukraine's government. And even if you get rid of Zelensky, anybody who you put in is still, how can I say it? Even if they're saying the right things, are effectively controlled and are not necessarily coming from direct elections from the public itself. It's effectively somebody who is, somebody else backing them in their decision making.
Of course, that's why the United States, together with Russia, needs to sit down and work out a situation where there's going to be a neutral government confirmed by both sides that it's going to come into power in Ukraine, lead Ukraine into elections, have free elections where there's going to be opposition, real opposition involved in this, that it can go on TV. Get out of, and also have all these Ukrainians who are abroad be able to come back openly with the border, so they will know that the border is not closed, that they can leave them back and forth if needed, so they can come back and vote, because it's impossible for a lot of those to come back and vote from Europe. There's more than 6 million in Europe Ukrainians. They cannot physically all vote. There's not a possibility to do that for the embassies of Ukraine, so they can have those people come back and vote to Ukraine, have an open border for them so they know they'll really get out. That's one thing. Second of all, there's 1.3 million Ukrainians in Russia, and right now who fled from this war to Russia. Think about a possibility for them to vote, because they're going to vote for an opposition that's going to be peace with Russia also. They have a right for their vote. They're Ukrainian citizens. So this has to be all worked out together. The United States cannot just come in and say, we're going to want this and we want that. They don't know what they want, because they don't know what is happening on the ground. The new administration, they want something good for Ukraine to happen. Trump wants peace for Ukraine. I do believe that, and I trust Trump, and that's why I supported him throughout these years, even though I was falsely sanctioned by Pompeo, the guy the globalists and the warmongers, and people like Pence and Mnuchin. But I do believe in Trump and his team and his family. They can bring peace not only to Ukraine but around the world. But they need to understand how to do it right, or to have people who will consult them and work out together with Russia from both angles, because Russia also knows what is on the situation on the ground, maybe even much more than the United States, because it's bordering with Ukraine and we were one country for more than 350 years, so it knows what is happening there, because Ukraine is, when Ukrainians speak Russian, it's the same as in Russia all over the place. So we have no even differences, and we have no accent in the same Russian. So there's a big accent in Belarus and other places, in Georgia or other Soviet countries, Ukraine and Russia, hardly no accent. So you cannot tell them apart, which is different. So we have to understand that this has to be intercombined. America doesn't only have the last word on this, and has to go forward. And also Trump needs to understand that if he keeps the CIA on the ground in Ukraine, it will sabotage through all these right-wing groups and radical Nazi groups like Azov, the right sector, and everything else that is left there in Ukraine. I don't know, there's a bunch of them. They will sabotage and coordinate them, so they will undermine any peace deals also. If the politician even agrees, those radicals will come in and basically they're terrorists. They're going to do terrorist acts against politicians in Ukraine. Leave the CIA out of Ukraine, and then the new government, the neutral government, will handle those terrorists on the ground on its own. And Ukraine will basically bring peace to Ukraine much faster than it can happen. Whatever's happening right now.
Yeah, your point is, even if Zelensky was not so committed to the war and wanted to end it, there would be a man with a gun standing behind him, threatening him to not sign anything in regards to a peace deal. Okay, that's problematic for getting anything accomplished.
That's
I
one
want to
thing,
get
but
your
Zelensky wants war. The problem with Zelensky, he wants war because
right.
he believes he has no physical other chance because he understands that's his way to stay in power. I believe, and I know Zelensky, meeting with him a couple of times personally after the elections, after he became president, officially at that time. Now he's not officially. He does want war. He's a very bad, he's a bully character figure, not a good person, and he doesn't believe in any values and values of somebody older, somebody younger, that he needs to listen to something that somebody maybe knows better. He only knows that he's right, and that's his problem. So with him, that's a different story. But anybody else, other politicians, or they'll have some radical group, terrorist group on the ground, have a gun to their head, or they'll have Newland and the deep state and Soros and CIA having their file in their hands, and they'll have a criminal case against them or sanction them against around the globe, and they'll have all their money frozen, assets frozen, because they're all in the West. So there's a big problem from both
Yeah.
sides in this situation.
I want to get to a clip from Arestovich. You mentioned Arestovich was Zelensky's spin doctor, to give a term for him. I'm fascinated by this clip because it's what it means. That is the fascination here. The notion that you would knowingly go into a catastrophic war is amazing to me. And yet, that is what Arestovich is saying in this clip, that they understood that they would have to go into a war in order to get into NATO.
То есть, если Украина получает выдачу в НАТО, то тогда мы можем
Тогда
говорить
мы-
о каких-то сроках прекращения войны.
Нет, ни о каких сроках прекращения войны мы не будем говорить. Наоборот, это, скорее всего, подтолкнет к крупной военной операции России против Украины. Потому что они должны нас будут просадить в...
Now, for the American audience that don't speak the language, what he's saying is, well, we understood that us going the route that we were going was going to prompt Russia to have a full military campaign in order to prevent us from being part of NATO. Effectively, this is what we need to do in order to become part of this organization. Okay, that is amazing that they go into it knowing that. That's the part that blows my mind when dealing with this. It's like you are going into a war with Russia in order to be part of NATO, a military organization that is supposed to protect you from Russia. So obviously, you're not under threat because you're trying to get into a military organization. The very act of getting into the organization, however, will create the threat. And yet we got to go through that birth of fire. That is mind-blowing. Like, as you point out, you were around during the time that all of this was taking place. Give me your take on this clip and what Arestovich is saying.
Look, everybody knew on Ukraine, and not just me going around during that time. I left the government in 2016, officially resigned from any government position that I was having at the time. And then
to be fair, this clip took place in 2019.
Yes, and then publicly went into opposition to Poroshenko, and then was working with consulting people like Pavel Fuchs, who was financing Zelensky at that time. So I knew all those was happening behind the closed doors. And the problem was about NATO and Ukraine. Everybody knew about this. When I was studying in the U.S. in the 2000s. We had our political science professor talk about this and saying if Ukraine joins NATO, there's going to be World War III. Everybody knew about this was 20, and this is like if Mexico or Canada would join China or be part of China. Everybody knew that'd be war. Yeah. The same thing here. And even though they knew that this was going to happen, they knew Zelensky sold out to the British. I think in June or July 2019 when he became the president of Ukraine. He went to the MI6. He met with the head of MI6, him, Yermak, and some other people around him. And so they basically knew that they're going to have war. That's why they had the so-called big building project in Ukraine, where they basically wiped out billions of dollars on building roads and infrastructure, which was hardly built. And then the war started, so they had all that money in their pockets, and the West closed their eyes on this. So basically, they let Zelensky become a billionaire, multi-billionaire, throughout not just the war, but before the war. And that's why he put Kolomoisky in prison, because Kolomoisky wanted to make a peace deal with the Russian Federation in 2021. He knew that the war is going to happen. Everybody knew that it was leading to war. Ukraine is not doing anything to implement fully the Minsk agreements to get back Donbass as an autonomy, which Russia agreed on and everybody agreed on, the Donbass agreed on. Everything was just, Ukraine just had to ratify in the parliament and say, yes, we can make it happen. And Zelensky had that authority, he had the majority, full majority in the parliament to do that, constitutional majority. So basically, he didn't do anything. He didn't do nothing. He was just smeared on Putin when they were meeting about the Minsk agreements. And they knew that this war was going to happen because they were being prepared for this war. And no one was preparing for this war. When the coup was happening, they knew that Russia was going to take over Crimea in 2014, take it back for security reasons, because that's where their naval base is, the largest naval base in the Black Sea, which they had it for hundreds of years. It's historically Russian, that territory basically. So, and it was done peacefully, but they knew they had to take the bait for Russia, to have Russia come in and have the Ukrainians hate Russia for doing that. So that's what they did. They basically let Russia take Crimea. Then when Donbass was, people were pros in Donbass to leave Ukraine. The director of CIA, Brennan, gave an order. I was in the meeting to fire the shit out of the people in Donbass because they were fighting for Russian values, for Russian language. That was the director of CIA giving an order to the acting president, Turchinov, after the coup in Ukraine in April 2014, to bombard Donbass from choppers through. And then this happens, and this was moving forward.
Say that one more time. You said the U.S. president.
No, the director of CIA, Brennan.
Brennan, director of CIA, gave an order to bomb the people of Donbass. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. I was in the meeting. Aaron Mate wrote an article last year about this, and he quotes me on the 10 years and what's happening in Ukraine under foreign rule. He quotes me on this because I was in the meeting. There was a few people who were in that meeting, and I was the only one who spoke out because this is what was really happening on the situation there. And that's where it led to. This war was all coordinated by the West. It was a proxy war, not only against Russia today, but against Ukrainians on the ground, just because they wanted to speak the Russian language and have their church, their values in it. So the U.S. was behind all of this from the beginning. They knew that Crimea was going to be taken in February 2014. They knew that Donbass was going to be shelled because they gave that order. Then they made Ukraine fight Russia, even though Ukraine could have signed. There was numerous meetings with Russia right before the war, in December 21, in January 22, in February 22, when they were saying, have the U.S. agree that Ukraine is not going to join NATO, and there will be no war. But no, the West said, NATO doors, Biden administration said, the NATO doors are open for everybody. We cannot say that. And there was not just the question of joining Ukraine in NATO, but the question of NATO being ready on NATO boots on Ukrainian ground. There are 3 military bases in southern Ukraine. The Brits, the Canadians, the Americans were there. There were biolabs. There were there were missiles in Ukrainian soil, NATO owned. There were full-armed Ukrainian military, which is coordinated and controlled by NATO. And it was not just a country peaceful to Russia. Ukraine was made an anti-Russia political means. Everything Russian, everything Soviet was destroyed. If you think about or read Soviet books, you would be put to prison or put on trial or have to pay a fine. If you'd go out and commemorate the people who fought in World War II, your grandfathers, for fighting the Soviet army, for liberating Europe from the Nazis, you would get beat up by the radicals and the police would throw you to prison. This was the reality in Ukraine on the ground. So this was it was happening for years and years and years, and the West was controlling it. They were coordinated by the globalists, the deep state, the Obama administration, the Biden administration. And today, if Trump wants this to stop, he needs to get the U.S. out of Ukraine. Then Ukraine can have its sovereignty back. Until then, Ukraine is not sovereign, independent. There's going to be dozens of Zelenskys, dozens of Zelensky's. Zelensky is not a good character also. They're pushing him PR that he's going to be next president. But he was the one who was sending all those young guys, soldiers to the front lines to die. He knew that the Russian army is stronger. And then they were lying about this. So they're all involved. They all have to be put on trial for destroying a country like Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainian soldiers are dead because of them. 67,000 Ukrainian soldiers are dead in the Kursk region. And now the Ukraine is fleeing that region, retreating from that region. For what? for PR and American PR to make more money for Lindsey Graham, for make more money for the Biden administration, for Sullivan, for all that crap. That is the biggest problem here. And if Ukraine would be sovereign independent, this war would never happen. We would solve our differences with Russia, drinking a bottle of vodka together, and our differences would go away. That's what we did before. Even though Ukraine was stealing gas from Russia throughout these 30 years of independence, Russia would still give a good deal for Ukraine because it understood it was on our border. We were on the borderline. We were one country before.
Yeah.
We were one nation. We can solve our differences together. Today you steal our gas. Tomorrow we're going to raise the prices a bit, but we're going to give you a good deal on it also. Everybody's going to win-win in this situation, and that's it. But no, the West had to intervene. The West had to destroy this whole situation. The West had to Hillary Clinton put in its fake church in Ukraine, which is now taking over the church, which with a 1,000-year history. And this is the craziness that's happening. And Trump, I hope he understands, and Trump Jr. and his family and everybody around the Trump administration today, get out of Ukraine. If you get out, this war is going to end. Stop financing this. Stop financing this regime. The people of Ukraine will not lose. The regime in Ukraine will lose. The so-called opposition, which is controlled by the deep state, which wants to F you over, will lose. But the people will win because they're going to get their lives back. And it's going to be settled really faster, much faster, really in a couple of weeks. If Russia and real Ukrainian government, who's going to think about Ukrainians, not the money, but Ukrainians, will settle this together. And the U.S. will be a good moderator in this because they left Ukraine and they're really going to be moderating now because they're part of the conflict, unfortunately, because they're giving weapons to Ukraine. Just
to be clear, how do you... I've had this conversation with another guest, and they pointed out that effectively the Nazi-inspired government needs to be pulled out root and shaft. That in order to get any kind of deal, in order to have any sort of Trump's man, and I'm saying Trump's man, I think you would say somebody who's looking out for the best interests of Ukraine and wants to be out of the war. I think those people will be very similar. I think to your point is you don't want Trump's man because Trump's man is still Trump's man. You want somebody Ukrainian. And I agree with you, by the way. I think your point is the only way to do that is to get MI6, the CIA, get these intel services out of the country because they have been to the detriment of Ukraine. And they have fundamentally supported neo-Nazi and right-wing groups, as opposed to allowing Ukraine to be whatever Ukraine is in its electoral system. How do you do that? I think that's the question, right? Like, how do you get all of these people out of their offices? How do you get these Nazis and depower the Nazification of the country? I don't have an answer for that. I don't even know if Trump has an answer for that. Give me a take.
First of all, yeah, it has to be a person who's going to be pro-Ukrainian, like a real Ukrainian, like the Ukrainian that was there peaceful, the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, not the Nazi after 2014 bad zombie Ukraine, whatever you call it. The breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, that's the person you have to have who's going to take care about the farmers, the people, the agriculture, the industry, which is going to be left, whatever's going to be left there in Ukraine, and who's going to be ready to work and build Ukraine over from the ground up. That's what that person, and who's going to also respect the Trump administration, and who's going to respect the Putin administration, and the Belarus administration, the Hungarian administration, who's not going to be against everybody and saying you owe us, everybody owes us, and we hate you, but because you're giving us any money, we're not going to hate you. We're going to hate you tomorrow if you're going to stop. No, a normal leader and a statesman. That's what Ukraine needs. Second of all, who's going to respect everybody on both sides and with a good relationship with the United States. And I'm saying that the United States has to leave Ukraine for now and keep its diplomatic corps, but leave all the CIA, MI6, and everything. It has to be an order by the President of the United States. Executive order, leave Ukraine. I think he knows what's happened there. He can have the classifications on his table, the classified documents, what's happening, who's responsible for this. Look what they came up with USAID. Tons of documents, tons of craziness, what was happening. They're financing whatever projects around the globe, which were nonsense. And today, the same thing. They can do it through the intel agencies and give them those documents on Trump's table. And people like Kash Patel, even though he's FBI, but he's a trusted man. He knows foreign politics pretty well, from what I understand, looking his interviews. And other people like General Flynn can advise and get it out of there. You're going to save, so not just only you're going to get Ukraine sovereign and bring peace, but you're going to save billions of dollars, because that's, I think, another just drain hole where U.S. is spending so much money. As soon as they get out with an executive order, you have a neutral sovereign government agreed upon by both sides parties at this time, Washington and Moscow, put in place in Kiev, and they will, if there's going to be no support from outside for these Nazi groups, that government will clean house. And that was, I think, we put one agenda on their point, to clean the house for neo-Nazis, put them on trial, and for people to see within the first 3-4 months of their governments. I think if that happens, there's going to be no protection from the West of these Nazi groups. People know who they are, like people in the government.
Yeah.
If I was there 10 years ago, like how long ago was it? Yeah, 10 years ago, I was in that position. And I know who these people are. They're still there. Some of them are dead, but most of them are still there. You can easily clean them. You're going to have the right law enforcement, the right law enforcement groups, and they will be put on trial. Nobody's saying that it has to be undemocratic. It has to be open. People need to see who these people are and what they did. And they have to be questioned on trial to publicly say what crimes they committed, not only against Russians, but what happened, what crimes they committed in Ukraine, in Odessa, firing up the building with 50 people who were fried up there. I was in that building after the fire happened. We came there with a government delegation, but we had to close our investigation because radicals came in and said, "Oh, we're going to take over now." And I saw those bodies fired up in Odessa in May 2nd, 2014. Answer for all those crimes that happened in Ukraine during the war, before the war, whatever. And it's all going to lead to peace. Give the people in Ukraine the truth, which they deserve, and people will not just. I'm not saying that you're going to forget about this war. We had a civil war 100 years ago between Russia and Ukraine, Belarus, like the White Army and the Red Army. There was one country, the Russian Empire. Millions of people died, more than today, and the country united together was one country during the Soviet times. Fought the World War II together, won it, and there were no problems. The same thing here. Just bring back people their lives. Get a normal government that's going to be trustworthy for them. We're going to respect international relations, everybody around them, the United States and Russia. And then there's going to be peace in Ukraine. And get the CIA out of there. You're going to save billions of dollars. You don't need to have to look anywhere else. This is the way out.
Andre, this is, I would say, an explosive interview. It is, and you're probably right. And not just probably right, you are right that they overthrew that government in 2014 and they were using Nazis to do it. And so, look, from your mouth to God's ears, I hope that is a sane government that we get that works in the best interest of Ukraine. And I hope Trump acknowledges that and at the very least on some level work towards that. Andre, thank you for this. Andre Telezhenko, he is a Ukrainian whistleblower and a former diplomat and a damn good friend of the show. Thank you, Andre. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal. God bless. All the best to you guys.
You have a good one, man. Be safe. Thank you. Wow. I wrote that down. CIA chief orders bombing of Donetsk. Because that's a major deal. Now, I'm saying that's a major deal, but that's something we've done in the past where we ourselves have bombed places that we were trying to overthrow. South America being a really good example. In various governments where we were effectively knocking over the banana republics, where United Fruit apparently moved in, beseeched the U.S. government for assistance when workers started to organize, and the U.S. government went after the governments that were trying to work out in the best interest of their citizens. In one case, you have the CIA bombing a building, I think Allende, I could be wrong, but bombing the building. And so, God, man, this leads back to the question I always had. Did they sleepwalk into it, or did they knowingly go into it? When you get Burns back in 2008 explaining exactly what's going to happen, you are going to provoke a civil war. And then there's a civil war. You get an overthrow of the government. And then you get the U.S. being in direct control of that government. I mean, even the speech that Joe Biden gave, where he said, I told him to fire a prosecutor, or otherwise they weren't going to get the money. Okay, that is a weak, impotent government at that point that is under the thumb of the U.S. And so when that government is doing things, is that government doing things in an independent manner? Is that government even sovereign at that point when you get Victoria Nuland effectively saying who they were going to put into the government after they overthrow the legitimate government. Andre was there for that. He was there for it. That's why he's such a fascinating person to talk to when he brings up those tidbits. It's like, yeah, I was in the room when the CIA chief ordered the bombing of Donetsk. Okay, that's big. That's big. Because part of the fact that, the reason Russia got in was it was a civil war on their border. And yet in Ukrainian military, they were killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians. And so if you're getting a CIA chief that's ordering the bombing of ethnic Russian Ukrainians, okay, well, that's massive, right? Fascinating. I want to go into another clip. So this is JD Vance. JD Vance is admitting something here that I don't know why they thought that this was going to be this way. In fact, meaning I don't know why they thought. JD Vance is talking about the global south. And he is effectively arguing that, look, we went through globalization with the idea that the global south was always going to remain on the bottom rung of societies in an economic sense. Why? Why did you believe that countries would not want to develop and expand to make their lives better for their citizens of those countries? I would argue that is the entire point of a country. If not, then what is? Yes, I know protection and integrity of the state, fair enough, but protection and integrity of the state to do what? To make lives for a population that is ideally safe and prosperous. That is the point of the state. So the notion that JD Vance is like, yeah, we went through globalization believing that the global south was always going to remain, at the bottom.
Because there were two conceits that our leadership class had when it came to globalization. The first is assuming that we can separate the making of things from the design of things. The idea of globalization was that rich countries would move further up the value chain while the poor countries made the simpler things. You would open an iPhone box and it would say designed in Cupertino, California. Now, the implication, of course, is that it would be manufactured in Shenzhen or somewhere else. And yeah, some people might lose their jobs in manufacturing, but they could learn to design, or to use a very popular phrase, learn to code. But I think we got it wrong. It turns out that the geographies that do the manufacturing get awfully good at the designing of things. There are network effects, as you all well understand. The firms that design products work with firms that manufacture. They share intellectual property, they share best practices, and they even sometimes share critical employees. Now, we assume that other nations would always trail us in the value chain, but it turns out that as they got better at the low end of the value chain, they also started catching up on the higher end. We were squeezed from both ends. Now, that was the first conceit of globalization. I think the second is that cheap labor is fundamentally a crutch, and it's a crutch that inhibits innovation. I might even say that it's a drug that too many American firms got addicted to.
Now, I just want to point out two things. One, yeah, globalization, we knew people were going to lose their jobs, but they can learn to code. Okay, for one, as someone who is a software engineer, coding is not an inherent quality in everybody. Not everybody wants to code. Some people want to be able to work a factory job that they know will be there for their entire life because they want to be secure and they want to be intact and they want to make a good living off the factory job right here in America, building whatever they're building, cars, boats, bridges, whatever. They want to keep that job. They want to be able to work that job. They want to make a decent living off that job. And so to be very cavalier saying, well, people could just learn to code. And by the way, Democrats have said something very similar when they were talking about shutting down oil fields in West Virginia, saying, okay, we need to stop the oil and energy coming out of West Virginia in regards to the coal mines. We don't like it. We believe it's dirty. And so, yeah, those people need to lose their jobs and those people will learn to code or something like that. It is one thing. If you come to an assessment that the economy is changing and that the government is going to make amends for the fact that the economy is changing to ensure that the citizens of the country will remain intact, as opposed to people will just learn to code. If you've been working a job for 20 years and you lose that job, going back and doing something else is not easy to do. We're human beings. We get in a mode and mindset. This idea that, hey, you're going to lose your job, but you can always learn coding. It's nonsense. It's cavalier. It's frivolous. It's a throwaway as compared to the people's lives that are being wrecked by it. So I just want to make that point first. The second point is this belief that the global South and that places that you say will just do the building will not want to learn what they're building. It's just amazing. Why do you believe that countries on the lower end of the economic scale would want to remain on the lower end of the economic scale? And look, he may be talking about China in this case on some level, because China has gotten technologically proficient and technologically sophisticated in a way that freaks the US out. Because now you have Europe begging China for the right to teach its technology and its capabilities to Europe, because Europe has gotten so far behind. The US, when this was taking place in China, called it theft. They said this is theft. They're stealing our products. They're stealing our materials. They're stealing our know-how. Because China was like, if you want to come into the country, we will allow you to make ungodly sums of money in coming into the country. But we need to know what you're doing. We are not going to remain on the back end in this way. China pulled out, 200 million people out of poverty? The US population is only 320 million people. So they pulled out like 2/3 of our society out of poverty. I suspect on some level, that is what Vance is talking about. The United States feels it breathing on its neck, and in some cases surpasses us. I mean, if China wants to build a high-speed rail, they just build it. We've been trying to build it for the last 20 years and can't get it done. I'm saying Vance is acknowledging the world is changing. And as the world is changing, the model to which we were operating on no longer works in the best interest of the US, and we need to shift and change the model. That is why Trump is doing all of these gyrations, emotions now on regards to the issue of tariffs, with this idea that we're going to try to bring jobs back. We're going to try to reshape the world economy to be in the best interest of America. Everybody's taking advantage of us. Everybody's taking advantage of us. As if cosmically, God stated that America needed to be in a prime position forever. This admission by Vance is amazing. But I don't think this would be an admission you would have got 20 years ago, as they were coming up with the conception of globalization and the conception as they were building up this globalization model, that various countries that, let's say, were in a less dominant or admirable economic position, that those countries will remain in that position and just feed us. And we will just remain rich, and we will go on in perpetuity with the world being this way. That's amazing. That's just amazing. Fair enough. Look, I've said before, Vance is a more coherent, let's say, arbiter than Trump. He explains what he's talking about very well and in a very competent way, whether you agree with him or disagree with him. He's very good at his ability to explain stuff in a way that Donald Trump is not. Trump is not coherent. Trump's all over the place. You have to kind of figure out what Trump is trying to do based on the direction that he's going. Vance tells you outright. We don't care what Europe thinks. That was Vance. Vance was the one they sent over there to give Europe a rap on the knuckles. He is good at that. If Democrats believe that in 2028, when the next president run comes up, that Republicans would not have anybody to put on the ballot, I would put to them that Vance is going to be a far stronger candidate than what they think. I could be wrong. We'll see. I want to bring on my guest, though. We're joined with the man himself, a good friend, Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is a political analyst. He runs his show, Garland Nixon. He is on all times, so definitely check him out. In fact, he's going to have a hell of a show today that is going to go for several hours. How you doing, my man? You doing okay?
I'm doing wonderful.
I saw this clip. I saw it this morning, and I thought Garland is the perfect person to talk to about this. Chistopher Steele has come out of the woodwork. I don't know if you've seen this. He's been doing interviews, and he goes on Piers Morgan and gets his knuckles rapped by Scott. What is the guy's name? Scott Horton. Listen to what is said here. It is amazing to me that after everything that's taken place on the issue of Russiagate, it is known that Steele lied, that he got it wrong, that he was using all of this information and data that was completely dodgy and stovepiped into the FBI, CIA, all these intelligence services, where they actually went after Donald Trump in a way that I have never seen before. Effectively, Russiagate. I guess McCarthy will probably be the closest thing to it. And almost took down a president because of it. Because their motto was, well, Trump got in because of the Russians. And if we find anything, we will take him out in a soft coup. Scott gets the ability to confront Christopher Steele. And this is what it said. I want to get your take on what Scott is saying here. Just amazing to me that Christopher Steele came back out to woodwork after all of this.
And this liar framed him essentially for treason. And by the way, his primary sources were a Russian named Danchenko, who had been under investigation for being a Russian spy in the past. And the only reason they had dropped is because they mistakenly thought he left the country. And then his partner, an American named Dolan, who actually was a registered agent of Russia. And they were the two primary sources who made up all those lies that you and I just recited, Pierce. That,
by the way, just to interrupt real quick, Christopher Steele shaking his head. Everything Scott just said that was true. Everything he said was true. In fact, Danchenko was being prosecuted by the U.S. government over a lot of this stuff.
Well,
so the notion of him shaking his head, like,
well, there was maybe a little bit reason for him to shake his head. Let me tell you why. Because in what Scott Horton said, I would dispute it a little bit. Because the guy, Igor Danchenko, you're calling him a Russian. They're implying that he was working for Russia, right? He was working for the Brookings Institute,
right?
And he was working with specifically for Fiona Hill. So he was very specifically at the time a Democratic Party operative. So what they're trying to do is pretend, this is the pretense there that is false. The pretense is, well, Steele should never have trusted him because he was working for the Russians. So he was feeding them Russian misinformation, right? So that then says that the origin of all the lies in the Steele dossier came from Russia. Well, Russia did it. You were using a Russian spy. That's a lie. He wasn't working for the Russians. He was working for the Democrats. He was working for the Brookings Institute. He was working for Fiona Hill. All of the lies came directly from the Democratic Party. So even Scott Horton, for whatever reason, has it completely wrong. No, it didn't come from the Russian. No, it wasn't a Russian spy. He was a Democratic Party spy on the payroll of Fiona Hill and Brookings Institute. So even Scott Horton, his words help the anti-Russian people because they can then say, well, you know, poor old Christopher Steele, he was misled by the Russians. No, he was not misled by a Russian spy.
Christopher Steele was trying to get opposition research. That's what he wanted. So why would the Russians feed him information that the Russians were trying to overthrow the U.S. election? I agree with you. It makes no sense. Like,
right. But he got, and the guy that he got it from was on the payroll of the Brookings Institute. And Scott Horton says, well, he was being investigated for as a Russian spy. No, he was not. He was working for the Brookings Institute for Fiona Hill. He was working, who might I add, eventually testified in an impeachment case against Donald Trump. She was working. She testified in an impeachment case against Donald Trump. The person he was working for eventually worked on the plan to impeach Donald Trump. He was at the beginning of the plan to impeach Donald Trump, and his direct supervisor was at the far end of the plan to impeach Donald Trump. So Scott Horton gets it wrong. I would argue with Scott Horton. I love you, Scott Horton. You do a lot of good work, but you are actually helping the anti-Russia people by implying that Christopher Steele was somehow misled by the Russians. And Christopher Steele knew at the time who he was getting it from, and he hid it. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation. You're absolutely right. Everything you just said is right. I guess I was putting out there. Horton is right to go after Steele.
Yeah.
That what Steele put out was nonsense. That Steele put out a bunch of opposition research in the service of a political party. I mean, the entire document was to get opposition research on Donald Trump. Opposition research is not meant to be
well, you
honest.
know what? I wouldn't even give it the credit of being opposition research, right? Opposition research implies that they looked into something and they found some dodgy stuff and twisted it. Right. No, they made it up from whole cloth. There was no research. They're just like, let me see. Donald Trump is Russian spy, maybe? Okay, sounds good. Write that down. That's not research. They made it up out of absolute lies. So it wasn't opposite research. In fact, it wasn't opposition research. It was the opposition making up lies to take out Donald Trump. So it wasn't even research. That would be given at the bit. If at least if they'd went online or look, might I add, the other guy that they got, I think his name was Dolan, Christopher Dolan or something.
Yeah.
He was in Virginia. He had been the head of the Hillary Clinton campaign in Virginia when she was running for president.
Well, I mean, Clinton was the one that got this information. I think it came out of McCain or something like that. But I guess my point is, this was rumors and just nonsense that they came up with, that they ran with and criminalized the rumors and nonsense using Steele, who is sitting here shaking his head. It's like, this is outrageous. Like the fact that Steele is showing his face after the Steele doc, it's just mind-blowing. That's a little bit more. And thank you for that. You nailed it masterfully.
That made it into Steele's dossier that they use. And none of it was true. Not the hacking of the DNC, not the Alpha Bank, not any of the Steele dossier. I'm amazed that this guy is willing to show his face in public right now when he's nothing but a washed up spy who hadn't had contacts in Russia for years by the time that he published that pile of lies.
And you know what?
I love that. That washed up spy has, I can't believe he has the temerity to show his face after pushing that document. Russiagate was not a minor entity. And I would go so far as to say part of this inability to make peace now is directly related to Russiagate. Even the degree to which Joe Biden was willing to pursue that war, I would wager to you, was party to the Russiagate stuff and the bad blood that was injected into the American political system by Hillary Clinton, using this as a way of attacking Donald Trump. And that attack has lasted for years. And it has seeded the American public with a certain point of view, especially Democrats, that Trump didn't get elected on his own steam, that Vladimir Putin overthrew our elections in a coup and installed Donald Trump as his principal actor in the United States. Okay, this is nonsense, but this is what they ran with. This is what the Democrats, even today, if you get a random Democrat and you guys get in the conversation, it will come up. It will come up. Give me your take.
A couple of things. Number one, the fact that it came from Steele makes one thing obvious, and that is that MI6 led the charge to take out Trump. The MI6 was they were the leading edge of the attack to take out Trump. They were like, let me at him. All right. That's number one. If I were to interview Christopher Steele, I'd ask him something differently. I'd ask him as a professional. You know, I was law enforcement and all that kind of stuff. And I worked with various three-letter agencies for the state of Maryland, supposedly on terrorism at the time. Looking back, I think there might have been, so they may have been up to much more. But at any rate, what I would say to them is I would talk to him about the level of incompetence. I'd say, look, you know, I know, we all know it was a bullcrap report and that you were just out to get Trump. It was your job. You were getting paid. I don't agree with it, but we all know what you did. Let's not pretend here. I would say, however, the level of incompetence that report shows is stunning. I'd say I can do a better report than that, Christopher Steele. I'd say, let's start here. You wrote in that report that Russia was coordinating their finances to help Trump out of the Miami consulate. But there is no Russian consulate in Miami. Don't you think perhaps you should have done a little bit of research? You wrote that report. Don't you think that you should have at least researched, hey, it's the Miami consulate. Let me look up the Miami consulate. Maybe I'll put in the address. Holy crap, there is no consulate in Miami. Maybe I shouldn't put this in. We all know it was a pile of crap, me and you both. But couldn't you have been competent enough to put a decent lie in there? Why would you write that they were coordinated out of the Miami consulate and never even research to find out if one existed? That's what I would say to him. Hey, I know what you're doing. Let's not pretend. You can stand there and do this, or you can wiggle your head in all these different directions. I think we all know what's going on here. But couldn't you at least make a decent lie? If I was to write, yes, Jamal Thomas robbed the bank on Tuesday, don't you think I should check and say, wait a minute, he was on vacation in Puerto Rico on Tuesday. Perhaps I better choose another day. No, I just write that. Yeah, there was he robbed the bank, but there was no bank, and he was in Puerto Rico. On First, the bank on First and Elm, the First National Bank on First and Elm. Don't you think I should look and see? Well, there is no First National Bank in that entire town. They closed their last one a year ago. And by the way, First National Bank sold out to M&T, so they don't even exist anymore. Shouldn't I research that before I hand in a report? You handed in a report with information that was beyond erroneous. You discredited the entire document and yourself by putting something in there. So I wouldn't have you write a book report for my 6-year-old daughter. If I had a 6-year-old daughter, I wouldn't let you write a book report for her in 4th grade, looking at that piece of trash that they paid you for. You should be embarrassed and humiliated that you handed in something of that level of absurdity. That's what I would say to him.
And like you pointed out, he got paid for that. He got paid for that. You're absolutely right. They didn't check. They didn't care. They just put something out and they ran with it. They ran with it. Like, that's the mind-blowing part of all of this. And now Christopher Steele feels the need to show his face again in order to come back. I guess what? To bolster the document that was shown to be fraudulent and false. I mean, just outrageous. I'm glad Piers Morgan had him on. I'm glad Horton, even as imprecise as Horton is, went after him for putting out a fake document. It wasn't just Horton. The other woman also got involved, effectively going after Christopher Steele, saying you tried to overthrow the government of the U.S. With this dodgy document that was brought into the CIA and the FBI. It's amazing. It's just
you know what I keep saying. If I was Trump, look, MI6 is trying to take Trump out. That's obvious. They have been from the very beginning. If I was Trump, there's an easy way to go after him. I would put their butts on the skittle. You know what I would say? I'm sending Tulsi Gabbard over on Friday, and I'd say it on Thursday. She'll be on a plane tonight. She needs to talk to the Scripples. I'm sending her over to talk to the Scripples. Yeah, it's critical. You know, we're really concerned. Before I sign anything or really go any further with the Russians, I want to make sure that I get all the information. So because that's something they may bring up and they may say they want to talk to the Scripples. So I need to talk to the Scripples first. I'm going to send Tulsi. In fact, she's on a plane. She'll be landing in 2 hours. She needs to meet with you and talk to the Scripples. I then call the Germans and say, oh, by the way, I got RFK Jr., whoever, my CDC people, they'll be landing. All of the Novichok stuff on what's the guy's name? Alex, the guy that died in prison. What's his name?
I know you
I remember that there was a Novichok attack on him. I got my forensic scientists landing. They're going to need to be looking at all of the information on Novichok, on the Novichok attack on him. We got to have that information. It's critical because I brought it up. You know, I intend to bring it up with President Putin, and I intend to say to him, we'll have no more Novichok attacks. And when I do that, I got to have everything I need to prove to him, look, dude, I got the evidence. Even if I don't give it to him, I want my people to have the evidence so we can work on it. Tulsi needs to talk to the Scripples, and Ratliff's on the plane with her. They need to talk to the Scripples, and George, because there is none. There is no evidence, and there ain't no Scripples. They have left this mortal plane at the hands of MI6. And how are they going to? So if MI6 is coming after me, I put their butts on the skid immediately and say, oh, yeah, we need to talk to the Scripples. What do you think the hell do you think they would do?
Oh, I have no idea. There will be a collective, S-fit.
That's what I do. You got to, you know what I mean? The best defense is a good offense. If they're coming after me, fine. Come after me. I'm going to make your life friggin' miserable. They better be glad I'm not president, buddy. They better be glad I'm not president.
Listen, you had to put the screws on. I want the Fetterman is one of the biggest disappointments in our political space. Two things. Democrats going around the country believe, according to the article Politico, I'll pull it up in a moment, that they would be able to go after Republicans for budget cuts. That is not what they got. What they got were a lot of angry Democrats who pushed their anger to the party itself. Now, I don't think this is at the volume that I would want. I don't think this is with the intensity that I would want. But the fact that some elements of the party recognize that the Democratic Party is a problem is good. Was in Israel. I don't know if he's still there. One of the biggest disappointments to ever come into Congress. For one, he looks like a slob. He looks like Lurch. He wears these, sweats into Congress, which I don't like. You're representing the entirety of your state. At the very least, you should look like you're representing the entirety of your state. This is him slobbing it up with Netanyahu.
How about giving him a beeper?
Oh, it's like
this is a silver-plated beeper. The real beeper is like 1/10 the weight. It's nothing. Really? Yeah, but it changes history.
When that story broke,
yeah,
and I was like, oh, I love it. And now it's like, thank you for this. Yeah, no, all right.
He's talking about the pager story in Lebanon that killed, wounded, injured all of those people, many of which were not members of Hezbollah, where they effectively just put random pages all throughout society that blew up and exploded at a particular time based on something Israel did to the pager. I don't know if it was a bomb in it. I don't know if it was just rigged to explode. I think it was just rigged to explode. Either way, it injured a lot of people. If you were riding a motorcycle or moped and your pager blows up on your hip, okay, you're going to crash that moped at the very least. If you are a 6-year-old and you hear the pager ring, you go get it and it blows up, okay, you may die. You're 6 years old. This happened all through Lebanon, what Israel effectively did. Lurch here is like, oh, I love that story when it came out. I thought it was fantastic. And Lurch has been one of these Democrats, just like many of the Democrats, that have been completely obsequious to Israel. And they've decided that anything that they can do is correct, even up to the point of a genocide. The point that I'm making here is Joe Biden was also part of that coalition, regardless of the complaining and bitching he was doing in the White House. 70 to 80% of everything Israel could do in pursuing the genocide was effectively paid for by Joe Biden and us, taxpayers of America. And now Trump, who said he was going to be different, has now opened up a war in Yemen while giving the green light to Israel to resume the war in Gaza after ignoring, by the way, the fact that Israel blew off the peace talks. Give me your take on this developing story.
A couple of things. Number one, what we're seeing more and more is the truth about Israel. And that is that, to me, the argument goes like this. Israel's running the United States. And the reality is that in the same way that my hand is running my body, it's an appendage of my body.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I protect my hand? Because it would hurt. I mean, I don't want to lose my fingers. That's part of my body. Israel is not even a project of the United States. They consider it the most important imperial intelligence and military outpost. It is an outpost. And people are like, Greater Israel wants to move out for Israel. Nah. In the same way that the United States wants to take Greenland, it wants to take Canada to expand its presence here. It's expanding its military outposts in the Middle East, and they're calling it Israel wants to expand. The United States has a base, which is Israel Intelligence Base, and it's expanding the base.
Yes.
And so the U.S. gets plausible deniability. It's not plausible anymore, but that's what it always was. It was this. Israel's killing a bunch of people. And the U.S. was like, well, we're trying to stop them, but they just won't listen to us. Oh, I mean, I wish Israel would listen to it, but we try to stop them. Here was a giveaway. This was a dead giveaway. That Israel had bombed a bunch of hospitals or killed some people in tents, something horrific, right? And the world was like, oh my God, Israel, this is terrible. This time we got to act. This is unthinkable. The United States, and like a couple of the Biden people, yeah, that was bad. They probably shouldn't have did that, right? And some of the Israeli cabinet members came out and said, hey, wait a minute. Tony Blinken was in the meeting with us, and he approved all of those targets like he always does. And everybody, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, people are not supposed to know that we approve or pick all of the targets. Remember the game. You're the bad guys. You do the evil things, and then we say, oh, we wish Israel wouldn't do it, and then we protect you legally all over the world and give you more stuff to do evil things with. It's a big game. Sadly, a lot of Americans don't want to believe how evil, brutal, and vicious their government is. So in their minds, they have to say, Israel's the one doing it, and my government's trying to stop them. We killed 1 million people in Iraq, 3 million people in Vietnam. I could go on and on and on. But somehow people want to believe that we're being dragged around into a genocide in Palestine, unlike all the other ones that we committed. Here's the truth. This Palestine genocide, which it is, pales in comparison to the genocides that the United States have been committing non-stop. It's just another genocide to the US empire. To us, it's outrageous because we can kind of really see it finally right in front of our faces because there's social media and there's people there and we get the information in real time. They can't get away with what they used to. But to the US empire, in fact, I bet you this, the leaders of the empire are like, what are the people all upset about? It's just another genocide. I mean, come on, this is nothing. This is a small genocide compared to the normal ones we do. We don't understand why the people are so upset. That's my position.
Yeah, I think two things are happening. I think in one sense, I agree with you. It's a colony of, well, let's say the US uses it as a military base in the Middle East. 1000% agree. I mean, Joe Biden even said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to create it. Effectively, we need our own little colony in the Middle East to affect our political will in that area. And we can talk to the Israelis, get them to do X or Y. They take the blame for it. We, shake our head at, oh, that's so bad that they did those things as they pursue US imperial objectives. 1000% agree with you on that. I also think there's a secondary thing of Israel itself that has their own thoughts and wants, and they want to expand Israel into that greater Israel. I think they fully commit to that colony every bit as much as America committed to the colony here in the US. And there are very clear similarities between the two, which is, I also believe, plays into it. We come to a location, we start off as Brits, we expand all the way out to the entirety going, with this notion of God is with us, this manifest destiny. It is cosmic. It is meant to be. We have all of these ideas in our head at the point where we break away from the Brits and just move and take all of America. And I think Israel has similar ideas in their minds, regardless of the way America sees them as a colony. Richard Nixon, I think, was perfectly right when he pointed out, look, our position is going to differ from Israel. And it requires a US president to say no when there's a deviation in what is in our best interest versus what is in their best interest, and it will come up. I guess my thought is all of this is not in our best interest. None of this is in our best interest. This idea that we're starting a war with Yemen that is unnecessary, as opposed to dealing with the main issue, which is Israel is expanding, they're running an open-air ghetto, and they're running an apartheid state. And you need to deal with that, or you're not dealing with anything. And by the way, one last point before I send it back to you. After October 7th happened, I thought, this is so bad, meaning this war over the last year, this genocide is so bad that you can't go back to October 7th. You have to find a solution. Like, you can't keep doing this. Something needs to be resolved in this. Now, this has been going on for like 70, 80 years, right? So me saying that, okay, you're Johnny come lately into something that has been there before you were even born. But it's true. Like the October 7th thing felt like something needs to break. There has to be something to change. Trump could be that guy. Trump is not going to be that guy. I don't think he's going to be that guy. Even if he looked the Muslim community in the eye, shook their hands, said, I'm going to end the war. Trump is not that guy. He has lied. He has betrayed the community, the Muslim community that he said he was going to represent. He has betrayed America when he said he was going to look out for America first. This is not America first. Give me your take on this.
Well, remember when Biden came in and said, we're going to bring back the good jobs. In other words, we're going to reindustrialize America. Remember Biden came in and said, hey, we're going to do free college. We're going to $15, all these stuff. And he got in and absolutely never even brought him up again. It's like, oh, I've been elected. All right, there you go. That worked. Thanks, suckers. And off he went, right? That's the way it works. And what people don't want to admit is that that's the game. So Trump came in, same thing. Hey, I'm going to reindustrialize. I'm going to bring back the good job. We're going to put America first. Really? Is this in America's best interest? From the perspective of the oligarchs and the empire, they feel it is in America's best interest because America is making the world safe for corporate hegemony. You know what I mean? So we're not included in that. We're not part of the America that they see that things are making it best for. Our jobs, we are an inconvenience to them. And, the people out here who actually have a conscience, who have some other concern with other human beings, we're an inconvenience for them. They have to propaganda us. They have to lie to us. And if worse come to worse, then they have to basically arrest us and throw us out of the country for saying we don't agree with genocide, with the genocide, because when someone says America first, what do you mean when you say America, right? Well, you said you were going to make America first. Yeah, I did. And by America, I meant all of my donors and my billionaire donors, not you. You're not part of this equation. So what's interesting is when he said America first, nobody ever asked him to define America. You know, I used to write laws and regulations. And what do you have at the beginning of regulations or laws? You have it like a glossary. You have a list of words that you're going to use in the laws, and then a definition of each one of them. Because when I read a law that says you can or can't do this, I got to know what that means, right?
Yeah.
So before, when a politician says, I'm going to put America first, nobody says to them, what's America? Well, they're going to lie anyway. But it means something very different to us than it does to them. We have a conscience. We're human beings. This is an empire. What they're really saying is, I'm going to put the empire first. If that means laying off a bunch of soccer moms that work for the Department of Education or the Department of whatever, who are feeding their families, who cares? You know, whatever that means, it means cutting. They're now going to cut the Department of Education, which will then push everything down to the states. You'll have gigantic classes. The schools will be a disaster. They'll have to cut schools. Our education system will be far worse than it is. And the only way you'll be able to get a decent education for their kids is pay astronomical fees for a private school, right? Which means now they'll stop to think, well, gee, we're going to have stupid people. We're going to have we've got to compete with China. China is improving their education system, and we're obliterating ours to save money, because the only thing we know is knuckle dragging. We're going to take our fist out and punch China and punch Russia and sanction and terror and force people our way. We never think that we need to improve. It's the Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan thing. When Tanya Harding realized she couldn't beat Nancy Kerrigan, did she say, I need to practice more? No. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. I was listening. I was interrupting. Yeah, no. When Tanya Harding didn't say, well, I need to practice more. I need to work harder. I need to do this. No, she didn't. She says, I'll take a club and beat her in the knees. That way she can't compete. That's imperative. That's what the empire does. That's all they think about. And I add, this restructuring of the empire, which means screwing over the people, is basically, we're going to restructure the empire on the backs of Americans. Why? Well, we're $37 trillion in debt. Why? Because of gigantic tax cuts for the billionaires, and because of war. All of that money went to the military industrial complex. So they say, we're going broke because we spent money in a profligate way, right? Okay, fair enough, you did. We gave all the money to the billionaires, and now we're broke. Really? Who's going to have to pay for it? The same people that suffered in the first place, the working class. We'll take more from them. They're running us broke by giving too much money to the billionaires through war and tax cuts. And now, how are they going to fix it? By laying off a bunch of working class people and cutting all the things that we need to get a decent education or whatever else. That's neoliberalism.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. Before you got here, I was showing a clip of J.D. Vance. And I'm fascinated by this clip because this clip is hitting directly upon what you are saying here, that they had a model in their mind of what the world was going to look like under globalization. And in the model of their mind, we were going to benefit, or at least, let's say, elements of society was going to benefit. But the global South was effectively going to remain poor forever. That we are going to remain in this primary position. They're going to build stuff. We're going to accept the things that they build. We're going to design things. And so we're going to have certain types of jobs. And they are going to, let's say, do the building force. And so they're not necessarily going to be the primary movers and shakers in the economy in regards to the side that's getting the most cash. We are. And he points out, okay, well, that didn't work. And because that didn't work, Trump now has to reshape the world economy to make America in a better spot. And I think your point is, what they consider to be America, it's not really the majority of America. It's a slice. This speech is fascinating by the fact that he admitted this aloud. Like the fact that you're saying, yeah, we expected the global South to be poor forever. Okay, why did you expect that? Why did you expect the global South to be willing to accept that position? And I would imagine what he's talking about primarily is China, which is a pivot that the Trump administration effectively wants to make because they consider China to be their primary threat, while Russia may be a military force. Russia's not necessarily trying to take over the world, whereas they look at China and say, okay, well, they're trying to displace us from our pinnacle position in regards to the world's economy. This clip is amazing. I want to get your take. I'm just going to play a part of it.
Because there were two conceits that our leadership class had when it came to globalization. The first is assuming that we can separate the making of things from the design of things. The idea of globalization was that rich countries would move further up the value chain while the poor countries made the simpler things. You would open an iPhone box and it would say designed in Cupertino, California. Now, the implication, of course, is that it would be manufactured in Shenzhen or somewhere else. And yeah, some people might lose their jobs in manufacturing, but they could learn to design, or to use a very popular phrase, learn to code. But I think we got it wrong. It turns out that the geographies that do the manufacturing get awfully good at the designing of things. There are network effects, as you all well understand. The firms that design products work with firms that manufacture. They share intellectual property, they share best practices, and they even sometimes share critical employees. Now, we assume that other nations would always trail us in the value chain, but it turns out that as they got better at the low end of the value chain, they also started catching up on the higher end. We were squeezed from both ends.
That clip is fascinating. Oh, God, I love that clip. JD Vance is like, oops, we got it wrong. We thought we'd remain in the pinnacle position forever, which, again, is kind of fascinating to me on why you believe you're going to be in a pinnacle position forever. But then people could just learn the code. I remember when the Democrats said this, I hated this, especially when they were talking about the people in West Virginia, where they were like, okay, those people, I know they were doing coal mining for all of these years, and I know they supply energy for America for all of these years. Many of them got black lung, many of them got sick doing it. But hey, oh well, we're done. Go learn the code, and you can get back into the economy. Okay, there's a reason that West Virginia turned red. It wasn't always red. Joe Manchin is a Democrat, but West Virginia wasn't always this kind of deep red state in the way that it became after Democrats just kind of uttered, frivolously. People can just learn the code. Vance is effectively echoing the same sentiment. It is amazing to me how similar these parties are in the way that they think. And that when the globalists and the people set up this kind of global economy in their minds, they were enshrining, let's say, the West as the pinnacle position of that economy with the idea that this is going to be the foreseeable future, the end of history. And he's like, it didn't work out that way. Apparently, countries that are poor don't want to be poor. And those countries make moves to not be poor. That's a problem for us. And so we need to reshape the world economy. That is amazing. So I think what he's talking about here is China. China pulled 200 million people out of poverty. They've gotten to the point of being economically, militarily, industrially sophisticated. They have 1.5 billion people. We have 320 million. They raise like 2/3 of what would be the US out of poverty conditions. And whereas we spent $10 trillion in Iraq, trillions of dollars in Syria, trillions of dollars in whatever part of the world you want to point to, they spent their money, education, healthcare, building, high-speed rail, putting stuff in space, etc. They didn't spend their money on wars. And Vance is recognizing we have a problem. We are falling behind, and we need to reshape the world economy in order to put us in a better position going forward into the future. Now, your point is, but you are simultaneously destroying the things in America that would allow us to proceed into the future, education being one of those things. You're absolutely right. Like the notion that MAGA is having this argument about, oh, we have these HB1 visas where people are coming over because Americans are too stupid to do those jobs. That is a bit rich when you're saying that and destroying an educational system or educational base that would allow us to actually do those jobs. How are both of these things existing simultaneously? And when you get Vance making the speech, and it's like, but dude, you're not investing in those things. You are cutting to the bone and destroying the infrastructure that would be necessary for America to actually compete in an economic, industrial sense. Go into this for me. Give me your take on this.
Couple of things. Number one, the first word out of his mouth, I'm like, is he a Marxist? The leadership class. He starts off by saying, this is about class politics. And in the same way that the socialists and Marxists say it's all about class politics, so do we. That's why we hate the socialists and Marxists, because they say it's all about class politics. And you're not supposed to know that, right?
Yep.
The leadership class. I would ask him, well, who the hell would that leadership class be? And might I add, he calls them the leadership class, and then his soliloquy goes on to demonstrate that the leadership class are idiots and they didn't know what they were talking about.
Yep.
Right? The leadership class, man, they got it all wrong. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're a bunch of friggin' idiots. So let's listen to their next plan as to how to fix it. He basically says the leadership class completely screwed up, and now the leadership class has to put together a plan to fix what they screwed up, right? I'm on a boat and I've got a captain and we're out in the ocean, and I say, Captain, where are we? I don't really know. What, haven't you chartered a course? Yeah, but it's all screwed up. I thought I was doing what I was doing, but I guess I really don't really know how to chart courses that good. And then I say, okay, Captain, you step aside. I know how. I got a sextant here. I'll use the stars, and I know how. I'll chart a course back home. He says, no. You let me do it. I'm the captain here. You're the one that got us here, and you don't know where we are, and you don't know how to chart a course, but you're supposed to come up with a plan to get us home. That's basically what he said. It's absurd. Class politics, they screwed up, but they're the ones that are supposed to fix it. It's amazing to sit. That's what I got out of that. And as you said, one of the things with class politics is the concept that there's a hierarchy. They're very hierarchical, right? There's a hierarchy. We're supposed to be at the top, and the global south is supposed to be at the bottom, right? And in a hierarchy, you're supposed to accept you were born here, right? You were born in this class, in this caste system, right? I'm a member of the noble class. My father was an earl, and my grandfather was the archduke of something else. I was born to the noble class, right? You were born a peasant. Our course in life was decided at the birth canal. You're a peasant. Why would you try to live like a noble person or try to make decisions like a noble person, right? Very class politics. Look, we're the US. This is where we were born. And as far as we were concerned, the global south was always going to be here. And these other countries were always, because this is a hierarchy system. And shockingly, they wouldn't accept their place at the bottom of the hierarchy. What he's really saying is our view of the world was incorrect. We thought they'd stay there. We thought they'd be happy to be there. You should be a happy slave. You were born a slave, and you should be happy to stay a slave your whole life, because that is your lot in life. That's where you were born. That's your place in the hierarchy, and you should be there. And shockingly, the slaves didn't want to be slaves anymore. The people at the bottom didn't want to be at the bottom anymore. And here's the problem they have with, say, a China and a Russia. And now what we're saying is, okay, we are going to reshape the global economy. Well, sorry, pal. You no longer have the power. You don't have the economic power. You don't have the military power. You don't have the diplomatic power to reshape the world economy. So the US is going to be screaming at Russia and China and BRICS, okay, we're reshaping the world economy, guys. We're reshaping everything. And they're going to be like, yeah, sure. Sorry, we're having a BRICS meeting right now. We're developing a new currency, but you guys, keep yourself, amuse yourselves. If we're going to be like at the bottom in poverty, falling apart, and the president's going to be shaking his fist at the world. No, we're reshaping the world economy. Everybody should listen to us, and that's where we're a joke. This is a joke to watch these clowns unable to accept the reality. It's like looking at Europe and Russia. Russia's going to have to accept defeat, and you're like, literally, this is a true fact. Your leader is von der Leyen, Ursula von der Leyen. She was the foreign minister. She was the defense minister for Germany. When she was the defense minister, she was so bad that they had a NATO exercise. The Germans didn't have guns. They had to take broomsticks and paint them black and pretend they were machine guns, like little kids running around going bang, 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 bang with a black stick. That's your leader. And you think the Russians have to acquiesce to your, and everybody's just looking at you saying, what the hell's wrong with you people? You've lost it. That's what I saw from him. Unable to accept that the hierarchy has turned upside on his head because the people, the so-called, as he called them, the leadership class, are clowns, are incompetent, hapless, greedy bunglers.
You're so right. You're so right. And I guess one last story. One of your favorites, Nazi Princess Annalena Baerbock. Well, I guess she's my favorite too, even though I think she's a lunatic.
She's a pretty little lunatic. I'll give her that.
Yeah, she's a pretty lunatic. I give her all the credit for being an attractive lunatic. She has gone so far as to saying that Germany is going to put right here. I can't believe that the Germans are okay with this woman being in anywhere near and close to power. And the stuff that she says. Like, she's the one who went and said, I don't care what Germans think. We're going to do this. We're going to support Ukraine to the final end. It's in German. I'll show her as she says it. But she is effectively saying that she wants to put in security of Europe into law. She's saying it right here. We must think about security strongly and above all, an integrated manner. In Germany, in 2 years, we laid out a national security strategy. Let's see, she laid out a national security strategy that combines internal and external security, where Germany assumes greater responsibility for its own security and for the security of Europe. Now, let's be very clear. Germany was the country, the preeminent country in the Second World War that initiated that war. They got, 30 million Russians killed, something to that effect? Like 1 million Americans, or hundreds of thousands of Americans, hundreds of thousands of Brits, hundreds of thousands of French. Should they be all that enamored with the idea that Germany is like, yeah, we're going to assume greater security control of Europe? And this goes along with Starmer and Macron trying to effectively put their thumb into the peace deal of von der Leyen saying, we're going to raise $600 billion. We're going to raise $1 trillion to revamp European security.
Oh, you know what? Unfortunately, I hate to say it, I got to leave. I just looked up and I got to do crosstalk with what's his name, and I just realized that they just texted me. Okay, so well, just call me back any day. Okay, sorry about that. I got to run. I forgot about that.
He's going to be on right now. Be safe, my man. Thank you for this, Garland. I really appreciate it. All right, shout out to Garland Nixon. Really appreciated him for joining me. Yeah, we're coming to the out. Shout out to Garland. Deeply appreciate him joining me. The Baerbock thing is wild to me, because my first thought becomes, okay, your country has been deindustrialized by this conflict. On top of your country being deindustrialized by this conflict, your industries have collapsed on some level. Your economy has taken a hit. They made an argument, or there was a joke that, the only person taking a warm shower in Germany was Schultz, because the population itself had been so damaged in regards to the war, especially in regards to the energy issue. And to have Baerbock come out and say, hey, I know we've taken a hit in Germany, but we are now going to add, as part of Germany in our constitution, that the basic security of Europe is now part of it. So we are going to raise, I imagine, a military in some way, whether it's working with Europe or otherwise, in order to protect Europe from a threat that didn't exist. And by a threat that didn't exist, I mean that Russia was never a threat to Germany. If Russia was a threat to Germany, do you really believe Annalena Baerbock would have joined in on Nord Stream? She joined in on Nord Stream because A, they needed the energy. The business relationships on some level is a relationship with a country that is non-militaristic. And they needed the energy. They didn't believe that Russia was a threat. They would have never entered into the energy deal if indeed they believed Russia was a threat. Russia became an issue because we kept pushing on the issue of Ukraine. And in pushing on the issue of Ukraine, you created a situation where you were making a hostile act on their border, which we would not have accepted. Germany would have complained about, the UK would have complained about, France would have complained about, meaning all of these countries that for whatever particular reason can't see why Moscow would feel some kind of way about a hostile military actor on their border of the combined forces of NATO, if they indeed were going to bring Ukraine into NATO, either de facto or in fact, was a problem. They were never a threat, is the point that I'm making. Europe is going through all of these permutations. We're going to raise all of this money. We're going to build this European military. We're going to build all of this stuff. We are going to have to cut public services in order to protect Europe. You're out of your minds. There's another way to do this. And it's, let's make a deal. Let's make peace. That way, we don't have to do all of this other nonsense. that we are effectively saying to our populations that we need to now, in fact, do. You don't have to do this. This is a waste of money. And yet, the Europeans may be stupid enough to do it. So when von der Leyen is like, we're going to raise $600 trillion to revamp our military industry and to build actual hard power for Europe. Okay. Where are you getting the money from would be my first question. Do you really need that money in that way? And will your European countries, all of them that are part of NATO or the European Union, be okay with putting out money that you don't have for a war that you don't need to fight? She's so attractive, but she is so out of her mind. And it is an unfortunate thing that Donald Trump is going to have to somehow negotiate. And I don't mean negotiate with Europe. I don't think Europe all that much matters. If I'm being bluntly honest with you, as bad as that sounds. I think this negotiation really is between Trump and between Putin. But you will have European actors that will try to get involved and undercut, subvert whatever Donald Trump is trying to do. You can see it with Starmer. You can see it with Macron. You can see it with this dingbat and lunatic. Great picture. You can see it with Germany in this case. You get Italy saying they're not going to put troops on the ground, meaning Italy is a hard no on that issue. But that doesn't mean that you'll get many of these European vassals to come out and try to do whatever is in their power to kill the negotiations and the deals that are effectively trying to take place or trying to come into existence with the US president and a Russian president willing to have this conversation. Russia recently put out issues that they have with moving in the peace process. One of those things was Zelensky. Zelensky is a problem. A, we don't think he's legitimate. B, every other day he comes out saying nonsense. And considering that Zelensky just broke the truce, okay, well, that is also a problem. He is a problem to the peace process. The fact that in the Ukrainian Rada or the Constitution, they're not allowed to negotiate. Okay, well, this is a problem also. How can we negotiate with someone who by law can't negotiate? So they're elucidating the problems that they're going to have in any kind of negotiation with the United States in regards to coming up with a peace deal. Are you going to continue to fill them with weapons if we come to a peace deal? When they had the Minsk agreements, you still had all of these European states and the US filling Ukraine with weapons as they made this agreement. Okay, we're not going to accept that. How do we ensure that you don't go back on the peace process? And I would imagine in their minds, they're also thinking about, okay, well, what happens when you leave? Then what? Are we going to go back to some kind of normality at being at each other's throats? All of these things are questions in regards to coming up with some kind of deal or agreement in order to end all of this. But on the positive, it's being talked about. And I would say during the Biden years, it wasn't being talked about at all. And the gang of European idiots that had a mouthpiece in the Biden administration have been sidelined to just talking to Kellogg, who has been sidelined himself in a negotiation. So the guy who was in Europe talking is sidelined. And he is sidelined talking to other European leaders who also have been sidelined in this process. It doesn't mean that they won't find ways in order to instigate or instill themselves into the process. You got Kalis, the other woman, I believe, from Estonia, who was like, look, we need to inject ourselves into the peace process, which implies that they are not part of that process or part of the dialogue. It's them talking into the void about things that they want to do and accomplish in order to get involved and, in their minds, start the Third World War, which is pretty outrageous considering they started the other two. America comes to the aid of Europe because Europe can't deal with its own affairs and keeps ending up in larger and larger wars. And if you're listening to Starmer and Macron, it sounds like they want to get into a third one. This is rich coming from Starmer, who is massively hated by the people of Germany, and Macron, who may have a 6% approval rating at this point. It's just amazing. These people are just amazing. I don't understand. I got into, it's my show, so I can talk about whatever I want. I had a conversation with Max. She is Austrian, European. I firmly feel deluded, but whatever, she's European, right? And I was getting into this argument about Trump, where I pointed out to her, look, the devil can do something good. And if he does, support him for it. It doesn't change the other realities about other stuff Meaning, I have no opinion. Well, that's not true. I do have an opinion of Trump. But my opinion of Trump is secondary to the things that he do in the physical matter reality universe. If he turns around and says, okay, I want to end the war, I'm going to say war is bad. It's a bad thing. Usually the killing people, the senseless and wanton killing of other human beings is not looked at as being a positive thing. Usually we have some self-preservation mechanism in us that makes us care about human life, unless you're a sociopath or psychopath. So the fact that he says, I'm going to end this, I'd say that is a good. That is an unmitigated, clarifying good of all the complications I have in life, of all the complications I have in deciding, okay, what's right, what's wrong, what's the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. Ending a war is usually a straightforward, good, and positive thing that doesn't affect or change anything else Trump may do that is a bad. Meaning the instigating, the fight in Yemen and the war in Yemen, that is a bad, that is a negative. The backing a genocide in regards to Israel, that is a bad. Those things in no way change the fact that ending the war in Ukraine is a good. Both exist simultaneously. Both are real things. And I accept both. I accept this is good. I accept this is bad. I don't know why people can't do that. She can't do that. And so for her, Trump is all bad. For many liberals, Trump is all bad. Anything that he does is bad. I don't understand why they can't look at these events as isolated in a sandbox. He's focused on this one. This is the outcome for this. This is the outcome for this. I'm saying we need to be able to do that. We have to be able to do that. It behooves us to do that. Because I would say buckle up for the next 3.5 years or 4 years left for Trump. But if he gets something good accomplished, then he gets something good accomplished. I don't have any issue saying so. One of the things he got accomplished was the release of the JFK files. Now, I am not the person to go into this. I am going to get somebody on the show that is a far better person to explain the items that were in the JFK files. But it seems that he legitimately released the JFK files. I've been looking at some of the tidbits that have been coming out of this, things about our attacks on other countries, things that were told to John F. Kennedy, or at the very least to the Kennedy administration, back channel communications between the USSR and the United States, where they warned, hey, I think they're going to try to kill Kennedy. Like, this is stuff that is effectively coming out of the files. Some of the people who are involved, people are peeling through it. It's not something that you can kind of just word search with a find. So people have been kind of taking the time going through the thousands of files. I'm going to find somebody who is good at going through the JFK and the Kennedy assassination files. The fact that Trump released them, good on him for doing so. Apparently, he's going to release the Martin Luther King files. The Epstein files tend to be a nothing burger, as people call it. But the JFK files has been like the stuff that people have been putting out on these files. Some of it are amazing. Is amazing if it's true. There's an Israel connection to Kennedy. There's a CIA connection to Kennedy. There's a CIA connection to Lee Harvey Oswald that they tried to bury. There's things that came up that the CIA apparently tried to bury that eventually came out in the files. And so it's fascinating. It is a good they released these files. It is amazing that these files haven't been released up to this point 70 years later. It is very weird when the government says there's nothing to see in the Kennedy assassination. However, we're going to keep the information under seal anyway. Okay, that's weird. If there's nothing to see, what are you hiding? You're hiding something. People are going to go through these files with a fine-tooth comb and figure out what's in these files. I am not the person to do that. There are better people to do that than me. A man must know his limitations. But when I get that person, we will go through these files. I'm just going to say, just wowed that files were released. And good on him for doing so. Good on him for doing so. Sarah Bills will be up. What time is it? Okay, Sarah Bills will be up shortly. I'm going to go to the chat for a bit to give love to the chat. This is Barack, membership. Welcome to the family, Barago. Everybody who's a member of the Thomas family. Brian Spencer, welcome to the family, Brian Spencer. And Barago Blark. gifted 5 Thomas memberships. Thank you, Blark. Thank you, Blark. You all help keep the show going, and you have my deepest appreciation for doing so. Right here, let's go to the chat again. Alexandra Black. Mom knew it was so effed up before that happened and paid dearly. Here's another one. But small countries like Palestine and Yemen are different treatment. Why? You may not like this answer. And I know when I talk to my mom, she hates this answer when I talk about this stuff. Power is taken at the barrel of a gun. It's that. It's not about being nice. It's not about giving something. If you have the power to do something, you do it. And for the US position, from the Israeli position, we have the power to do it. We have the willingness to kill. So we do. And we want to expand into this greater Israel. The US wants to protect its colony in the Middle East. And so it does. It's just that. It's not like there's no moral question about it. The morality doesn't really matter. They've been committing a genocide for the past year and a half. Obviously, killing is not something that they all that much feel some kind of way about. They're willing to do it. They're willing to rape. They're willing to pillage. They're willing to murder. That is what they're willing to do. So in the context of them willing to do that, they do it. What's going to stop them? The Arab states haven't gotten involved. Nobody else around the world has gotten involved. So what's to inhibit or stop them from pursuing their military and murderous objectives? Nothing. A lot of people would say, wait a minute, you're killing all of these people. This is bad. You've killed like 100,000 people, 2/3 of which were women and children. This is a horrible thing. I can't believe they're doing this. Okay, you need to reshape the way you look at the world. Human beings don't matter. Life doesn't matter. If you are in a position of authority or a position of power, you have the military capability of doing something, you do it. It's just that. What's to stop them from bombing Yemen? In fact, I'll go further. Yemen is taking it upon themselves to try to inhibit Israelis' murderous campaign. And under the power that they have at their disposal, what they've come up with is we're going to stop ships from going through the Red Sea. They had the power to do it. They exerted the power in doing it. They're accepting the consequences of the U.S. bombing in the way they accepted the consequences of Saudi Arabia's bombing. It matters more to them to do it. And so this is the power that they have at their disposal that they're willing to use. Sometimes the biggest hindrance to a fight is willingness to fight. And if you're over that hindrance of, I'm willing to throw a punch, okay, you're half of the way there. Doesn't mean you're not going to get your ass kicked. But the other guy may not be willing to throw a punch. They may not be willing to fight, in which case you get the quisling governments in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt or Jordan or some of these other places that will watch the genocide. They will bitch about it for their local populations, but ultimately don't do anything about it and may even help by allowing planes to fly through their airspace. For all of the bitching and moaning that Erdogan did, he still worked with Israel in the process of taking parts of Syria. I'm saying that these world leaders, these are not moral, nice, kind people. These people are mostly sociopaths. They got to that position by being cutthroat and sociopaths. So it's not a situation where it's like a peacenik gets in office and the peacenik has these moral, ethical obligations that they attend to when they're dealing with other nations. No, it's power dynamic. Do you have the power to affect your will on the ground? If the answer is yes, you do so. If the answer is no, you don't. You have the power to bitch. That is the most power that you have at your disposal. So yes, the U.S. looks and says, we're going to bomb Yemen. We have the power to do it. We don't like them stopping shipping lanes. So that's what we're going to do. Israel says we have the power because nobody else is going to get involved. So yeah, we're going to take and kill Palestinians. We're racist. We're fascists. That's what we're going to do. And that's what they do. It sucks. It's horrible. Human life should matter. But from their point of view, it doesn't. Whether it's Yemenis, whether it's Palestinians, whether it's Lebanese, or for the matter, whether it's Syrians. You can see what they did in Syria in overthrowing that government and how the jihadists are going door to door, massacring people in order to take over property. This is what they do. This is what they're doing. When Garland said, we have backed genocides, Garland is not being facetious. He's not even being hyperbolic. He's being truthful in that sense. The things that we have done around the globe have been ghastly. You can look at South America and the death squads that we were effectively backing in South America. Iraq, okay, you can't call it a genocide, but it was a war that didn't need to be fought, that was effectively premised on this lie that Saddam Hussein, at one point they were saying, was helping helping in 9/11. Okay, none of that stuff was true. But you still got 1 million Iraqis killed in that process. We spent $10 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan to do it. Do we care about the lives in that case? No, we did not. In any estimation of foreign policy, take life off the table as being something that matters. They would say it and they would point it out. But in real terms, it doesn't ultimately matter in regards to the way people, that they function in the things that they do militarily or economically for that matter. It's ghastly. It's legitimately ghastly. Trash Panda super sticker, shout out to you, Trash Panda. Thank you very much. You are deeply appreciated. Adam Price. Now give your CCP speech on how superior Chinese people are to everyone while you call others racist, CCP, trash. Again, why do you believe that because one is bad, that the other one is somehow better? Or because one is moral, that the other one is somehow not? Meaning, two things can exist simultaneously. I think Chinese people are just people. That's all. And I think people function in very similar ways, despite the overlay that's applied to those people. I'll give you an example. When I was in Dahab, Egypt, at one point, I think I was 30. And I remember sitting in the computer room with one guy watching porn beside me in the computer room. Muslim country. There's a religious overlay that's applied to the people who are there. And yet, that guy is still a guy. The overlay didn't change the human character in that sense. People are people. I consider Chinese the same way. I don't consider them morally superior, ethically superior. I just think they have a government that has organized itself in a way that it is elevating the position of the people in that country and competent enough to be able to get things accomplished. That's not morally superior. So, fair enough. Hit me on all you want, but hit me on the right things. Faye Lou, Adam Price, 08. Okay. I'm not going to go there. If you want to remove a tumor, the system complex, delicate, but at the same time, hard to slow down, big problem. Wounded vets need big solutions. Podcast Kid, you're absolutely right. I don't know the context of that conversation, but you're just right. Chinese people are just people that look at you with suspicion. They may. Okay. But again, people are people. I don't know why that's mind-blowing. Highlighting trolls shuts them down pretty good. Look, this is not an echo chamber. I expect people to disagree with me. The entire premise of Fault Lines was premised on disagreement. Zero issue with it. If it's legit, fair enough. If it's not, oh well. But I would like to go to my person that I'm going to talk to and that I am over the moon to talk to, Sarah Bills. Sarah Bills, she's an independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and co-founder of DD Geopolitics, a fantastic site. I pay attention to the stuff you guys put on YouTube all the time. It is awesome. Sarah, welcome to the show. How you doing this morning?
Good. I am so happy that I woke up naturally in time because I went to sleep before you got back to me last night. So I have a feeling that we're going to be doing this tomorrow. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
What'd you say? You woke up naturally on time?
Yes, I didn't even need an alarm. My body was ready to be on live with Jamarl.
People should not understate that, because when my rooster alarm goes off at 5 a.m, that I know my neighbors are like, "Will you shut the F up?" It's so loud. But it's 5 a.m. and I'm an insomniac, right? So if I'm in the bed at 3 o'clock, that alarm is my lifeline. That's the thing that's going to get me out of bed.
No alarms necessary, thankfully. How are you?
I have it at 5 o'clock, 5:15, 5:30, 5:45, 6 o'clock, 6:15. Take no chances.
Okay.
Take no chances. Look, I will tell you, I remember at the radio station one day, I woke up at like 9 o'clock. The show starts at 7. And I remember walking in and my boss, keep in mind, I had been here for years at this point, and I had been rock solid. And only thing you could do was laugh. Couldn't get up. Yeah, man, I couldn't get up. Sorry. I am so glad that you're joining me. I want to start with an odd topic, and I need to get somebody specifically on this. But I'm fascinated with this, and there was certain reporting that I want to get your take on. This is Istanbul. This is Istanbul. This is a protest against Erdogan because Erdogan apparently went after the mayor of Istanbul.
Correct.
All of these people are in protest. All of these people are freaking out. And it's not just in Istanbul, it's all over Turkey where there are protests against Erdogan. Now, I have to be honest with you. I didn't know. I assume Erdogan was somewhat popular. At the very least, had a majority. Maybe not, especially with this many people that are coming out. How damaging has it been that he has effectively arrested the mayor of Istanbul, who was apparently going to run in the race against Erdogan? And what people think of it as, okay, you're going after a political opponent. This is not, we're supposed to be a democratic country. Yes, you're a strong man. Fair enough. But we're supposed to have some semblance, patina of democracy in the country. And you going after the mayor who's going to run after you that may beat you, maybe, let's talk about that too, whether Erdogan would give up power in this way, is outrageous. There are even rumors that an airplane was leaving and they thought, okay, well, Erdogan is fleeing the country. I don't see him doing that, but who knows at this point we have this much protests. I mean, they were taking over police stations, government buildings. Yeah. Give me your take on this. This is astonishing for this to happen just out the blue. And one last point to add. You've pissed off Russia because you backstabbed them in Syria. So the phone call that Putin would have typically given to Erdogan saying, hey, we have intelligence reports that people might be moving against you. You're not going to get those. Those are over with, right? This is what Alexander Dugin said. He was like, you have effed up royally. You're pissed off one of an ally or has been allies in the region. Syria, who sent troops to protect Erdogan or defend, that's out the way. That's not going to happen now. He's alone. And people are pissed off. Give me your take on this.
I thought the same as you, that Erdogan kind of enjoyed some popularity inside of Turkey, but apparently, and what I can gather from the way the situation is unfolding, is this guy's kind of an Atlanticist, the opponent. His name is Imamoglu. I think, if I'm saying that right, please, Turkey, forgive me. Apparently, it's one of those things where we have somebody who's very popular in the urban centers or in the cosmopolitan centers, gaining more popularity in those centers. Maybe he's not so popular in the more rural areas. So that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. What happened is they voided his academic degrees. You need to have a degree in order to run for any office in Turkey, especially mayors of major cities, and obviously the president. So once that those degrees, they were nullified by way of the University of Istanbul and at Erdogan's request, obviously. But once they were void, that makes him no longer able to serve in the capacity that he's serving and no longer able to run. So then after that, he was arrested on charges of obviously fraud for the fake degree that isn't really fake. And I think another charge of conspiring to create like a terrorist organization or some kind of political organization, some other charge. I'd have to look up the exact wordage. But after that, he was arrested along with 100 members of the opposition party. And then obviously that's when things exploded. But from what I'm gathering, and I read about his politics, he's very pro-EU, very pro-West. So it seems to me that the most likely thing is that he would be kind of popular amongst like urban or, again, cosmopolitan liberals, coastal elites, if you will, our coastal elites, right? And then maybe not as popular, especially among more Islamic. He's a secularist. He's a Kemalist. So every time I hear Kemalist, I think Kamala, which is funny, but regardless, he's a Kemalist. So he is obviously not into the neo-Ottomanism that Erdogan is. That definitely helps shape Erdogan's policies. And I think that Turkey has a good undercurrent of nationalism. So I think that Erdogan still enjoys a great deal of popularity. I just think he's made some grave mistakes lately, especially in terms of Gaza, Israel, and Syria. So
the West wanted him out at one point.
They did.
They wanted Erdogan gone.
They would like this guy a lot better. They really would. He would be much more pliable and amicable to the West.
Is Putin stuck? assisting Erdogan in whatever way he
I
could.
feel like
because
he
of-
kind of is. And we were talking
That's
about
the
this
catch, man. Like,
No.
God, man.
That's what I said last
Like,
night. I said, we're going to do this thing again with the same thing that I told you guys in Syria. Although I did like Assad, I don't really like Erdogan. But I'm saying the evil that you know is easier than the evil that you don't know. Why do you think that Putin said, I want Kamala to win? He knew what he was dealing with. Like the same thing here. Like, why would we want Erdogan to stay? Because he's predictable. It is unpredictability. We know what he's going to do. We know what he's not going to do. That's more important. We know what he's not going to do.
We know his wants.
Yes. So I think that they might be stuck. There was a post that said something like, please, Putin, don't step in. Please, Putin, don't step in. But I was like, I had to take a step back emotionally and say, do I want him gone? Yes. But is it good for us? Probably not. So.
I guess that's my feeling with Erdogan. And maybe that's the thought in the Kremlin. It's like, God damn.
Yeah.
Like, we don't.
Gotta help this guy again?
Yeah. It's like, if you get rid of him, the guy who's coming in is not going to be your friend. He's not going to be a friend. Like, he's clear priorities that are different than what the Kremlin may want. And so you can imagine them looking at this thinking, okay, what do we do with this? What do we do?
What's the lesser of two evils? Atlanticism, neo-Ottomanism. How, like, those are tough choices. But that
is a horrible choice. I mean, because Erdogan is effed over Russia royally in the Syria sphere. I would imagine Moscow knows that.
I agree.
But as you said, they got to put their feelings behind them. And if they can help in any way they may.
And they will. That's how Russians are. That's how Russia works politically. They always do stuff that we're like, damn it. And then we have to be like, oh, right, you had to do that. I get it. Sort of thing. So I won't be shocked. Now the second or third time that Russia's saving Erdogan. So that's
because people may not know that they were given a heads up by Russia. I'm sorry. Yeah, they were given a heads up by Russia that a coup was taking place.
In China.
And this was what, a few years ago, where Erdogan
2020, something like that,
ruthlessly put down resistance against his administration. So we'll see. I mean, I don't buy that an airplane is left. I don't think Erdogan would leave. I don't get that sense.
No, I don't think so either. I think they moved the plane preemptively. They just moved the plane. It happens a lot. Or it could have been a diversion tactic. So I don't think he was on it either. I just think the plane left.
Yeah. If there was an election, and well, I guess this answers my own question, right? They voided the degrees, put the guy in prison.
Can't run.
So the notion of a fair election is kind of off the table, even if they had the election. Yeah. Just wow. I saw that and I thought to myself, oh, wow, that is amazing. One last thing, another thing I want to hit to, the Trump-Putin phone call. Give me your take of this. I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it, so I don't necessarily know how you view it. I ask everybody who does international politics their take on this, because everybody has a different answer. You get some people who are like, okay, this is nonsense. This is going nowhere. And you get other people who are far more hopeful and optimistic about it.
I was really
hopeful. Were past tense.
Yeah, I was really hopeful. And then I kind of watched the surrounding kind of actions of Russia before the call. I mean, he made fun of Trump. They've said things like Trump does one thing and says one thing and does another. So then now we know they don't take his word seriously. I was hopeful in the sense that I don't want MAGA to have I don't think that MAGA's earned a relationship with Russia. But my selfish ass is like, well, I just want direct flights and to not have to go everywhere to get a freaking visa. Like, can I just get a consulate and a direct flight to Moscow? That's all I want. I don't need like good relations or anything. But it was the afterward. The Kremlin never released their own readout. The only readout we have is from the White House. So that weird.
Wait a minute. I thought I was reading. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I thought I was reading.
They're citing the White House in RT, in RIA, and on the Kremlin website. They've cited the White House readout. They haven't even released their own readout. That tells me a lot. Then I read that weird little chunk that was like, the way that it was worded made me feel because I obviously translate Russian all day long. The way that it was worded, I was like, this just feels like a clunky mistranslation. I'm wondering what it was supposed to say. The part that said both parties agreed that Iran should never find itself in a position where it could destroy Israel. And it insinuated that they should never have the weapons to do so. But that's not a position that Russia holds. Right. I think that the actual statement is probably more like Iran and Israel shouldn't be in a position where Iran could destroy Israel, in the sense that Israel shouldn't open up that can of worms. That's what
Right.
I would think that the translation should have been. I thought it was very telling that there was never an official post statement from the Kremlin, a reaction, and then following the phone call, the talks in Jeddah that are taking place this Sunday were downgraded from ministerial talks to nothing. The ones on Sunday mean nothing. Plus it wasn't a real ceasefire. It was kind of like a loose, like, all right, we won't hit the energy sites, whatever. It lasted 5 or 6 hours until Zelensky hit an oil refinery.
Mm-hmm.
So where does that leave Russia? I mean, they obviously bombed it well enough after that, but now they're like, this continues. Like they can't trust anything these people say. Not only that, a F-16 was shot down right on the border, which is obviously a good thing for Russia. But understand that F-16s are nuclear capable. And now Russia knows that there's nuclear weapons on their border, nuclear capable carriers on their border. This isn't nowhere near over. Maria Zakharova's reaction to the call was, you keep telling me the ball's in our court, but you didn't tell me it was a puck and the game's just starting. Well, that tells you that they love playing politics in Russia. It's just beginning. Like the chase is on, and Americans cannot hold a candle academically when it comes to being political and understanding policy against the Russians. So they're just going to get circles round around them. So I'm not hopeful anymore. I think that they've actually degraded. I'm glad that the talks are still happening on Sunday, but they literally don't mean a thing. Now we're getting weird language, and I want kind of your thoughts as well. Is that out of the White House saying, we're going to take over their energy grid. And Russia said, what?
Right.
Like, what? That's an escalation. Like, they don't, like, America doesn't understand. They're like, well, if I come in and I take over, then we'll handle it. And Russia's like, that's an escalation.
Yeah.
That's not a solution.
It is super weird for Trump to be like, hey, you know what will keep your energy grid safe is if we own it.
Yeah.
It's like, what? How are you it's almost like Trump looks at this as a fire sale. It's like, all right, well, we're going to now take assets, resources from Ukraine because we can. And we can keep you safe if we, it's like a mob boss coming into your family business saying, you know what will keep this restaurant safe? If we keep it. It's like, well, wait a minute, it's my restaurant. Exactly. Yeah, it could be yours, but it could be unsafe in yours. Or it could be safe in mine. Which one would you like? Like, it's that thing. It's very strange in the way that they're looking at it.
Extortion.
Oh, I see it slightly differently. I think all of this is just politics. And what I mean by theater, I think it's theatrical on some level. I think when Witkoff went to Russia, and when Witkoff had a conversation with Putin, and Witkoff was like, look, we agree on the main contours of the deal. I think that's probably true. I get the sense that Witkoff is a straight shooter. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want? Well, we're keeping our territories. That's under the Russian Federal Constitution. We want those. We will give up claim to Odessa. We want the Crimea because that's Russian territory. That's meaning I think they had a frank conversation about what they want and what they don't want. And when Trump and Putin had their conversation, I would imagine Trump brought up Kursk. He was shot down on Kursk. He brought up territorial concessions. I would imagine he probably accepts the territorial realities on the ground. And so you're 50% of the way there if they agree on the main contours of it, and it's working through other stuff that's a part of it. And they've initiated at this point a peace process while Russia maintains the war. So it's not just, okay, we're having a 30-day ceasefire. Okay, well, you got a fart in a jar. He's going to sell that fart in a jar. He's going to go around like, this fart in a jar shows that we're moving towards peace and blah, 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 blah. And we're weeks away and all this other stuff. Weeks away is laughable to me. On it. As you pointed out, they've devolved it below the ministerial level. So there's that. That's interesting to me. As you pointed out, like, why would you need to devolve a conversation? If you're in a relationship and it's like, hey, we need to move out, but let's stay together. Your relationship's over.
Yep.
It's over, right? But nobody devolves a relationship. It stays in the relationship. You're devolving because you want to get out of it. So you could be right. I hope you're wrong.
No, I think that Sunday, because Sunday they also said it'll hopefully on Sunday we establish a framework. So Sunday's not the end. Sunday
Exactly.
is the continuation. No, I
It's
don't
the
think that they're
beginning.
ending it. Yeah, I don't know about that.
And it's the beginning as they pursue the war.
maybe, but I don't
Well, they're
think.
not stopping the war. I mean, I
No,
guess
I
my
think
point
after the
is,
last couple days, Russia's quickly realized that they can't stop. Funnily enough, is that while all of this is going on, my team is in Donbass. They went to the Zaporozhye power plant yesterday, and while they're there, they're being shelled by Ukraine.
are you serious? Is your
like-
team safe?
Yeah, they're totally fine. It was just three artillery shells and not close to the actual nuclear power plant, but they're shelling in the direction, and it's like they don't want peace. Ukraine does not want peace. And I don't think, and I think that they don't want it just because of the pride factor, because they're never going to win. But Zelensky knows that if he asks for peace or concedes anything, the nationalists have already told him, we'll hang you. We'll hang you in this capital. We'll hang you in Kiev.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many things going on at once. The Trump angle is rather fascinating because I think he does want a deal. I think he wants to be able to go to Moscow, shake Putin's hand, raise his arm, and say, get the picture. Trump goes to Moscow. I think he wants that. So I'm going to put that in his camp, that he wants it.
I'd agree.
Whether you move towards it is a different angle. And whether an American president can somehow find something to sell out of a war that America and Europe has lost is also a secondary question of whether he can pull that off. In the same way he's selling this fart in a jar, I suppose he's going to sell whatever he gets out of the deal. And I guess the thing that interests me is that they are what started off as a 30-day ceasefire that nobody was going to accept. It was understood it wasn't going to be accepted, has turned into Russia continues its military campaign as the US and Russia involves in peace talks, which is different than the 30-day conception that was effectively put up. So I do find a bit of optimism in that, because at some point, the Ukrainian military is going to collapse. And as they go through this peace process, they're going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. You're going to get the Kursk, where they get pushed out and destroyed or surrender in Kursk. That is going to be a psychological blow. And you're going to get a 2,000-kilometer front where Ukraine, at some point, their military will collapse. And this is going to happen and continue and proceed as they negotiate. And so it may be necessary for that weakness to hit the Ukrainian military, or for Russia to get to a certain point where they're like, okay, we're good. We can now have the ceasefire talks, providing you're not going to continue to give them weapons, meaning there may be a spot, that's a sweet spot, if that makes sense. Give me your take on that.
Excuse me. I think that Trump, I think that Americans are out of their league at this point when it comes to Russia. Not America, us, obviously the negotiators and the politicians. Yeah. Putin said, I've been through 4 or 5 U.S. presidents, and I know how these things work. He mentioned Minsk. He mentioned Minsk 1 and 2. What he's saying is that America does not hold their promises, and every 4 years the policies change. So why would I make an agreement with you when in 4 years you could renege on that agreement? Yes. And we're back to where we started. And I don't think that Americans have the self-awareness to say, yeah, you're right. How do we guarantee this? They don't understand that there's some consolations that are some cessations that they're going to need to give to Putin in order to meet him halfway. They're not going to be able to strongman Russia anymore. This is not the Russia of the 90s or even the early aughts. This is the Russia of 2025 who has survived all of the sanctions and become even more resilient. If that. And the people in Russia, I didn't know this. When I went in November, they were a little bit more neutral or ambivalent. They are not happy with the United States.
Radicalized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they should be. I mean, we've gotten 100,000, if not more, Russians killed. Like, meaning, even if the fact that Russia is winning the war is secondary to the point that somebody had to come out of their job, put on a uniform, and go out and fight, and many died. I would be pissed too.
It's not even so much that. It's that I remember I was there for the election. I was away in Russia during our election, and people weren't excited for Trump because they wanted the war to end. They were excited for Trump because they liked Trump, like they liked him. Yeah, they liked him. They don't, a lot of people in Russia, the way that I took it, most people that I spoke to wanted the war to continue until all goals are met. And they don't see that all the goals are met. It's not an aggression thing. It's not like keep killing them. It's the goals aren't met yet.
I see.
So, and I also spoke to a few people who agreed they weren't military people, but they were military peripheral. They worked and helped out with logistics and stuff. And they were talking to me and they were saying, even the people in Kursk said, if after all of this, if Putin stops short of what we want, we'll keep going on our own in Donbass. So they'll do a military mutiny on. So they're not ready to end. And then the people in Donbass, who you would think would be the most like, please let this end. It's been 11 years of this. Are like, no, we are not happy either. So Putin is not like American leader in where he does take into consideration the will of his people. Plus, Russia's so massive and large and doesn't have the infrastructure that we do, that a mutiny is a very big possibility. They are very far flung out in Ukraine with the military leaders. If they decide to keep going, what's Putin going to do to stop them? Execute them? So it's there's a lot of power balance there. Not that they're fighting, not that they're antagonistic to one another, but they're saying if he doesn't support us in this endeavor, we'll just keep going anyway. We don't care.
I've heard other people make that argument too, that look, all the goals of the military objective needs to be accomplished. Mm-hmm. This needs to be ended, not something that springs up in another 2 years. This needs to be ended. It needs to be settled going forward.
Right.
One of the interesting things was Root, where he comes out after having a conversation with Trump saying we need to renew diplomatic relations with Russia. Okay, that's pretty astonishing for the NATO leader to say that. After a conversation with Trump, NBC News is also reporting that Donald Trump is talking about pulling out of NATO, basically giving over European control to NATO. What do you think of these moves? I mean, it was thought that Donald Trump wasn't interested in NATO, didn't see the point in regards to the U.S. Leading a European entity. But I'm fascinated by this dynamic. The United States was using NATO as a power projection device.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah. So the idea that we're giving up our projection of power in Europe, is that a good idea? Like the Europeans have started 2 world wars. They're trying to start a third one. Is that something, an influence we really want to give up?
That's what I thought. I know that he looks at it as like, the dollar sign part of it, the red dollar sign, obviously, as we're pouring money into it. And yeah, we are, but that's kind of the way that our economy is structured anyway.
Right.
It's a power projection tool. We helped form NATO for that reason, and then later helped form the EU for that reason, to consolidate this power and make it easier for the Americans to control. I don't know why Trump doesn't understand that, or if he does and he doesn't care. But if you remove yourself from NATO, you lose all of that power projection in Europe.
Yes.
But maybe they don't care. Maybe they want to project power elsewhere. We know that they really don't like Iran. They're obviously projecting power right now in Yemen, and they want to project power in Taiwan. And maybe they just are spread too thin. But I think that's a really rash, very that decision needs to be thought about. The leaving of NATO will collapse. And not that I don't like NATO, not that it's necessarily a bad thing. But in terms of the United States, I would think that they would be crushing in terms of soft power and influence in Europe.
Yeah. Maybe they just don't think Europe matters.
That's sad. That's another thing I thought about, because, we are very Eurocentric. Well, because we are always told, that's where our ancestry comes from. And now that's what kind of attaches us to these continents. And now it's kind of shown that our genetic makeup of America is getting less and less European. Our interests are shifting away from Europe. Europe also isn't economically sound like it once was. It's more like a welfare state at this point. It needs a lot of help. Mm-hmm. And Trump doesn't see it as America destroyed them, or he sees it as, well, I didn't do it. I'm just reacting to the situations that I have. But yeah, I think it's a terrible idea to withdraw from NATO, but I also, the selfish trait in me wants to see it go away completely. So I'm fine with it.
Is he right that Europe no longer matters?
No.
I mean, the G7, for example. Okay, well, the G7 is no longer the G7. You have the BRICS nations that bring in more economic bang for the buck than Europe than the G7.
Mhm.
Russia has moved up to what, like number 5 or 4 or something in regards to economic power. And yet they're like, yeah, we don't need to be part of it anymore. we're BRICS. You guys do what you do. We don't need to be part of that. And hard power wise, that, you know, maybe they could take over a rowboat or something.
Right.
Maybe they could take over, you know, Mali,
Right.
smaller country. But
Again.
in regards to the big dogs, they don't matter militarily. They're in shambles.
But here's the thing. We could really be moving towards multipolarity, and that could be like, I'm really giving Trump a lot of credit. I don't know if he knows or what his ideas about multipolarity are, but we could be moving, and he could be also moving with that. Whereas Europe would fall under their own pole with probably Germany at one part and then Russia at the other. Russia's still a European country in Eastern Europe. So these spheres of influence shouldn't really be under the United States anymore. So, like, that's also the other side of it. In multipolarity, there's no reason why the United States should be the geographical hegemon of Europe. We're not in Europe, so we would be the hegemon of North America. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so maybe he's thinking of it that way, because Rubio admitted more than once, we are now in a multipolar world, and we need to start acting like we are. And that requires a lot more give than America's used to. And maybe that's why we're starting to kind of turn away from Europe. There's also some weird antagonism and animosity that like America has towards Europe, which I don't really understand. But I think that maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I think that there might be an element of the, you know, going into the multipolar world sort of structure, because that sort of thing is not going to work. And a NATO is not going to work in a multipolar world, a real multipolar world.
Do you think if the U.S. pulls out, it's the dissolution of NATO, or
barely? Oh yeah, they'll try, but they can't. They won't be able to resuscitate it in time for it. You know, they won't be able to reindustrialize in that sector in time to keep NATO going.
So you think it would collapse if the U.S. pulls out?
Yeah, I think it would be a paper tiger at best. It might stay together, but it won't. There won't be anything to speak of for at least a few years before they get. I mean, Volkswagen's now talking about getting up and building military equipment. That's going to take years to even change the factory over. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I saw that. Not only 50 years to change a factory over. How useful is putting tanks for an economy?
Right.
I mean, it may be a little bit, but it's not like a car in the way that you get multiple people trying to use cars. Right. Those tanks only matter if they get blown up. And I don't know if Germany is trying to start a war where they can just, hey, it's good for the economy to build tanks in a war. You're not in a war.
Not most people aren't structured the way we are. War isn't really profitable for other people. It's profitable for us because we have a war economy. They don't. Germany has an industrial economy that's been completely deindustrialized. They have to reindustrialize it to become a military economy. It's just not feasible. It's just not possible. Their industry is leaving en masse to go to China and to the United States. So I just don't. Germany would have to be the leader of a NATO. In Germany and France and maybe Britain would have to be the leader of a NATO inside of Europe. And I just don't see Germany being able to. And now we have Canada trying to join the EU. Everything is crazy. I think that the Europeans are also very attached to the idea of NATO. This weird, like, this is our safety blanket. Don't take it away from us. You know, and now we're being abandoned by the United States. It's like, you're not really our partner. I don't know. The whole thing is very strange. Like but I do hope that he does pull out of NATO and that NATO goes away and that we can. Because it's a step that has to be taken in order to keep going towards multipolarity anyway. These old liberal institutions that consolidate power under the West, they need to go. So it'll need to end eventually anyway.
I would like to give a shout out to DD Geopolitics for getting a shout out from a Congress member. I have to play this. The fact that you guys do good enough work where Congress is pointing it out. Shout out to all of you for this. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Love her.
Raising an article that you guys did.
One of the most extensive examples of regime change operations fueled by USAID is that of their role in the Syrian civil war aimed at toppling Bashar al-Assad. Reports from DD Geopolitics and other sources estimate that USAID funded over $15 billion into Syria over a decade, covertly funding opposition groups, mercenaries, and anti-government networks under the cover of humanitarian aid. This included support for militant factions and propaganda efforts, often in collaboration with the National Endowment for Democracy. The
Congratulations.
Thanks. I
Sheila has, I don't know if people can see it, but even in the background says DD Geopolitics. This is going to be in the congressional record forever. Good job. It will. I'm serious. I'm not being facetious. I know it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't care. A Congress member is boosting an article that you guys did, and it was good enough work for her to actually go through the data that you guys provided in order to put in a congressional record on the issue of USA. I got into an argument with somebody about USA yesterday, and I was pointing out to them, I don't care if it feeds a random baby, if it's getting thousands of babies killed.
Yeah.
Meaning, I don't care if it goes into a place and say, here, baby, here's, baby food from USA. If in the other wing, it's getting 1 million people killed in Ukraine, hundreds of thousands killed in Syria. Yeah, literally. So it's like, okay, the random baby, I don't care.
They blame Assad. Assad made 6 million refugees. I'm like, the USAID put more money into Syria than Syria did.
Yes.
Like money times over. So it's very interesting. But yes, I'm glad that she brought that up. It was really interesting to see someone in Congress talk about Syria. I was shocked that they didn't choose a European country. So I'm grateful for her for that. She's obviously not my congresswoman. She's across the country. So I look at her as a character in a play, and I love her. I adore MTG. I think she's hilarious. I think she's great. I think she represents our people. She's not, I don't agree with all of her policies, but I think she's great. And I'm happy that it was her, not like AOC. I just would have absolutely thrown up. So
why do you think it's the right wing that ends up on this side of the political spectrum where they're willing to say, hey, USA is overthrowing governments? And yet, domestically, they're so into this, we need to cut things to the bone, we need to get rid of social services, public services, etc. It is a weird political shift that I don't quite get. To be honest, it just came up.
MTG, I will give her the credit where credit's due. She has obviously made the very correct connection that regime change and destabilization creates more war. And she is a true blue anti-war, not a pro-peace, anti-war. She does not want us to be involved in any more conflicts. So that's the angle that she's coming from. And I get it. That's really pragmatic and almost admirable. Most of the conservatives wind up falling into we don't want to spend all of this money. It's kind of pointless. And it really is. It's a cycle that never ends. You have to keep spending the money, keep funding opposition groups, keep that sort of propaganda train going. So they're more about the fiscal responsibility of it. But there are a few like Thomas Massey, MTG, and a few select others that I can not name off the top of my head. And I'd have to look because there's probably more that actually see it as more pragmatic. We're talking about getting less involved in places, and USAID is one of those things that's keeping us heavily involved in places. So it's a very pragmatic thing to shut it down. They're pointing out the waste, which is a great tactic because regular Americans money and costs resonate with regular Americans. So if they see, oh my God, we paid $7 million to find out about trans mice in Brazil, they're going to flip out. But in all honesty, those things need to go because they're wastes of money. They're destabilizing places. And obviously we need the money anyway for ourselves. But I think that she comes to it, and some conservatives come to it from a very pragmatic thing. Whereas the liberals play the other. They're like, we have to have USAID because it feeds a baby somewhere in El Salvador. And you're like, okay, but we're not talking about the long-term effects of what USAID, they don't care. It's the short-term solutions. And that's why the Democrats are really falling short. It's because they're all identity politics and immediate gratification. And the Republicans, God, and I don't agree, but the Republicans are coming out like the pragmatic, rational people. And that's just
weirdly enough.
MTG is pragmatic and rational. So you heard it here, folks. Like, yeah.
Are you guys going to do the JFK files?
No, I think it's a distraction, and I think it's stupid. I think.
Do you? Okay, go into that for me. Why do you think it's a distraction? Because I got to be honest, I've been fascinated by some of the leaks, and maybe I haven't been caught by a shiny object. So fair enough.
But
the fact that he released these things,
I was excited. I was really excited. I went through 3 or 4 of them. No, actually, I went through the first page. I think that each page holds 10, and I was like, "This is so tedious. I'm gonna wait for the others, because there's other people much more experienced in JFK files than me. I'm not even interested in the what we do know. So it's just something that I find to be a huge can of worms that I'm not ready to tackle. So I also don't love conspiracy theories and speculations because I'm not creative enough. And so I was like, I'll let the other people take care of it. And then I sat there and I like really thought about it. And I was like, why are they coming out right now? And I'm like, so I wrote on our page, I said something like, let me get back to the stuff that matters, the news. And then I was like, I'm going to go look at the news. And I'm like, oh, we're pounding Yemen while Israel is pounding Gaza. And who the hell knows what's going on in Syria? Turkey's bombing Iraq and northern Syria. So it's like this dude is starting World War III. And he's going to hang in the JFK files in front of us. And it's great because, and you want to know what, these politicians, as sad as it is, American politics gleans a lot from Twitter about public opinion, and especially the Trump administration. They really are in tune with what's going on in Twitter. Well, then the spaces just went nuts and they're all JFK files. And I said, screw this. They want everybody to pay attention to the JFK files. Why? Because they didn't release the Epstein files, which is what really matters. That's something we can do something about because it's still happening right now. We're letting sex offenders and admitted sex offenders back into the United States and into the White House. And we're bombing the hell out of Yemen. All at the same time he releases the JFK files, which even if it came out when front and center said Israel did it, what would that change?
Yeah. And would they even admit it?
Right. What would that change? We're in World War III, literally. Nothing about the ceasefire talks in Ukraine and Russia has come to fruition. And we've started bombing Yemen, you're bombing rubble. You're bombing what's already been bombed. So it's like.
That is a really good point. Donald Trump came in as, I'm going to be the guy that end wars, not start them. And you're bombing the hell out of Yemen. I mean, to be fair, the Biden administration did too. And it didn't do anything.
The Biden administration told me they were saying no new wars and we're anti-war. So,
well,
I'm not saying let's bring Biden back. I feel like we can work better and more pliability with the Trump administration. There's more potential for change and stuff like that. But they did say no new wars, not getting involved. And not only did they go back on that, they were starting a war. Why? Because China negotiated peace between Saudi and Yemen. So no longer can we say, Saudi, go bomb Yemen for us with our bombs, because that will insult China and potentially, whatever. So we do it for them now. That's exactly what.
Are we doing it for them, or are we doing it because
we're doing it for us? But we do it. Yeah. We don't have to. We can't tell them to do it anymore. So we have to do it ourselves. Yeah. And this whole kind of setting up now, I don't know how serious they are, if it's just testing the waters, but this whole like whatever Yemen does, we're going to hit Iran. How does that even make sense politically?
It doesn't. I don't even know how the U.S. makes that argument, considering we've been arming Ukraine. I mean, we've given Ukraine $300 billion in arms and money, and then we're going to turn and say we're not involved. However, Iran is, if it arms the Houthis.
Right.
I don't even know how they would arm the Houthis at this point. I mean, as my guest pointed out the other day, they've been shipping lane, they've been blocking all that stuff. And so whatever Yemen is making, in fact, I'll just ask you, how does Yemen do that?
The vision, not manufactured, they're assembled there. They buy a lot of stuff from China, a lot of piecemeal parts from all over the world and piece things together, especially their drones and some of their more crude missiles. I don't think that there's much left in the way of stuff that's been given to them or imported. I know Russia gave them weapons at one time, and obviously Iran has supplied them, and so has China. But I think that those pipelines are pretty much gone, and they're left with what they have and what they can make now. Yemenis are a different breed. You're not going to be able to defeat them. They're not even like Iraqis. They're nothing like Afghanis, and they're even fiercer than those two groups of people. They're more resourceful because they've had to be. They just don't know. We're getting ourselves into another quagmire. You can't beat most of these countries unless you do a ground invasion. And if we do a ground invasion, we're already casualty aversive as a whole. We will lose so many soldiers, you'll turn right back around and leave. Like it's a very frivolous and pointless endeavor. We're bombing rubble and mountains is what we're doing, and we're killing kids and women. I've spoken to them, and keep in mind, this is Ramadan, and Yemen is very big about Ramadan because they have nothing else besides religion. They have no food, they have no schools, they have no nothing. So they're very serious about religion. They're very serious about Ramadan, and now we go and bomb them. It's just gross.
Yeah, it is gross. And as you said, pounding Gaza at this point.
Pounding
Also,
Gaza.
yeah,
Khan
this is,
Yunis and Rafah are just
and this is after Israel went back on the peace deal, never fulfilled the obligations of the peace deal. Donald Trump did not push them to fulfill the obligations of the peace deal, and then blamed Hamas when Israel killed the deal, and has given the green light for Netanyahu to effectively go on a bombing spree in Gaza. What is the point of this bombing spree? Like, for people who are like, oh, well, they're going after Hamas, they are just like, what are you bombing at this point? Everything's been destroyed. So it's not like, you've destroyed the UN buildings, you've destroyed the schools, you've destroyed the hospitals, you've made 1.2, 1.5 million people's lives radically miserable. And there doesn't seem to be any, restraint is the wrong word, any, let's say, specificity to the people getting killed. They're just killing women and children predominantly. What is the point of this? Egypt is not going to accept them. Jordan is not going to accept them. And so basically you're stuck in a position where you need to kill everybody or expel. You can't expel. So what is the goal? You're going to kill 1.2 million people? Like, give me your take on this. What is the point?
I talked to some Zionists last night and I kind of asked them the same thing. And they said, well, buffer zones. And I said, what? Who's going to man them and who's going to live in them and who's going to patrol these buffer zones? I said, why are you moving into the buffer zones then? Why are you resettling? This is obviously a Greater Israel project. And then finally they relented and were like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. So for somebody that's not like a militant Zionist, that's like, let's ethnically cleanse all the land of everyone but Jews, for them, this is really irrational. But for a lot of the people, a lot of the very staunch Zionists, they're like, no, we obviously need to kill them all. Like, that's very, like, they're very matter of fact about that. And that's why the other headline this week was Trump looking to move the Palestinians to Syria, because they know that they will kill them all. They'll kill them all. They don't care. And they'll do it with American weapons. And we backed ourselves into a corner because we said, Trump said verbatim, I will give them the tools necessary to complete the task. So we're on the hook for this too. So I don't really know. I don't know what to say about Gaza anymore. I'm at a loss for words. And then you're kind of in this vicious cycle to where Israel stops bombing the Gazans or Palestinians or whomever, says, we won because we survived. And then, a week later they say, Hamas has never been stronger. And it's like, well, do you want them to bomb you again?
Yeah.
Because all that Israel does is say, Hamas is still in Gaza, and then they bomb it. So that's
Hamas,
kind of the cycle that we're in. And then these past air assaults, allegedly, I can't confirm or deny, but allegedly they killed a lot of high-ranking Hamas and PIJ and Al-Quds members. So there's still, in Israel's eyes, I obviously am not pro-Israel, but they still have a lot to do. A
lot of killing to do.
Mm-hmm.
They will kill them all. I feel like you in Israel. I don't know what else to say about it. Like, we watched a genocide with our own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
The horrific pictures that comes out of Palestine for a year and a half, nearly 2 years. And you become, I don't want to say deadened to it, but you kind of do.
That's the point.
But I don't want to be deadened to it. I want to be outraged. And I don't want to be outraged. I know this sounds weird. You should be outraged over it, right? And like every time you see it, it's like I want to be outraged, and they're gonna cut that clip. Jamal Thomas wants to be outraged about this. No, I don't want to be outraged about it, right? But you should be outraged about it. When you're seeing like babies and kids getting eaten by dogs based as a result of something that they were doing and going to get the hospital. Okay, well you should not be normalized to that. You should be, your pulse should race when you see something like that. And yet, when it comes out day after day after day after day after day, after the first 3 months, you said everything that you're going to say. It doesn't change. It just gets worse. It just stays bad. I agree with you. I don't know what to say. It's horrendous. I get sick of watching it and knowing nobody's going to do anything. And even more to the point that we are backing it to the hilt. We're paying for it. We're giving the weapons. We're giving the money for it. They couldn't do it without it. I don't know what to say. And moving to Syria. For people, though, who are Democrats that see Trump is bad. Look, Joe Biden was also trying to get those people out of Gaza and either move them to Jordan or, for that matter, Egypt. And both countries said no, just like Donald Trump tried to move them to Egypt and Jordan, and both countries said no. And so now Trump's like, hey, Syria is a patsy. What about them? Do you, by the way, last question, do you think they're going to do it? Yeah. Do you think they're going to even be able to do that?
All right, let's say hypothetically they do move them to Syria. All this does is set the stage for the next ISIS that they want to make. You've got a lot of very disgruntled Sunnis. A lot of them are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood and supported the overthrow of Assad. They support HTS. In Gaza, there's a lot of support for the overthrow of Assad. In West Bank, not so much, because West Bank and Assad they're almost like two different countries. Putting those two back together would be a mess. Not that they would go to war, but it'd be a messy. The West Bank and Gaza, totally two different policies. But yeah, so you're going to move the people that were in support of the overthrow of Assad into the place where the people who support the overthrow of Assad are committing genocide and war crimes. I mean, it feels like, oh, if we do this, we could definitely have an ISIS 2.0. And then we have a patsy or a puppet state right there and smack dab in the center of the Levant. Israel is a client state. They're not a puppet state. They don't do what we want them to do. They're a client state and a vassal state because they live off of our welfare, but they don't listen to what we say. And we try to make it look like we're not telling them what to do anyway, so we don't feel like stupid when they don't listen to what we say. But Syria is literally a puppet state up for grabs. They have no idea what they're doing in there. They have no idea how to govern, and they're losing quickly. They're losing ground quickly in terms of popular opinion because the people have less now than they did under Assad.
Sarah, I always appreciate these conversations. You are fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Bills, independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and founder of DD Geopolitics, as heard from in Congress by Marjorie Taylor Greene, as she referenced the articles that DD Geopolitics was putting out. Great job.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
You too. Be safe. Enjoy.
Bye.
All right. Sarah Bills, she is fantastic. I always appreciate her joining me. She's always nice enough to do so. It is 10 o'clock. We have reached the end of the show. I want to thank all of you for joining me on this episode. Trash Panda, I want to give a shout out to people who support the show, support the content. Trash Panda 82, $4 super sticker. Thank you, Trash Panda. Much appreciated. Blarg, gifted 5 Jamal Thomas memberships. Let's go to that one. Thank you, Blarg. Deeply appreciated. Brian Spencer, new member. Welcome to the family, Byron Spencer. And Blarg, once again, gifted 1 membership. Thank you again, Blarg. Guys, Navy vet, good work, Thomas. Keep up. You're playing what? To get that baby? What? Good work, Thomas. Keep it up. You're going to get that baby. I don't know what that baby is that I'm trying to get, but thank you, U.S. Navy vet. Shout out. This is 441. Okay, I'm not reading the number. The Western white nationalist imperialist ruling class, fully subservient to the Zionists themselves. I would say yes. But the reason I'm thinking about that is because I am not certain whether it's the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail. As long as the Zionists are doing what they consider to be okay, that may be okay if that changes. Look, I don't believe U.S. policy and Israeli policy are equal or even in line with one another. I think these things are radically opposed. And if the JFK stuff, well, I'm not going to. There are better people to do it than me. That is often a question of whether it's the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail. At least Jamal looks nice in a suit. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Shino Choi, shout out to you. Alexander Lett, shout out to you. Arcane Eclectic, Pharaoh Agent, all of you. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to end this Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 118. Signing off. By the way, I won't be here Monday. I will be back on Tuesday. I will be in transit to my new place, dwelling. I don't know what that looks like. Hopefully, it is sufficient where I can set up and everything else. The show is paramount or primary. But I will be here Tuesday in a new location. Yes, I will be here tomorrow for Friday's show. I'm just pointing out on Monday. I'll give a reminder that I will be back on Tuesday. You all have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, signing off.